Hello guys, welcome to Fanfiction Audiobook. Here you find original fan-made audio stories. Enjoy the journey into new worlds.
Naruto World. Chaos begins with Clay. Part 1. I really love Clay. If it's OOC, flame me, don't flame Clay. The cover is a character design cover, and it's authorized. The character on the cover has nothing to do with the protagonist of this book. I wanted to write a story about a group favorite, Little Sun, mainly unfolding from Clay's perspective. Absolutely no CP, Clay is still a little girl. The timeline and plot might get a bit messy. I'll try my best to check Baidu if I can't remember clearly, so lore sticklers, please be gentle. Mainly lighthearted, there will probably be very few descriptions of scheming or the dark side. Clay is just a little girl, she won't be invincible or one-shot everything, but she has guardians who can. General warnings. Power levels are suppressed, won't save Shisui, won't save the Uchiha, won't break up Team 7, will probably save the third Hokage, unbiased, includes scenes of Skirk guiding Sasuke. The pace won't be very slow, my writing is average, alright, the list is endless, just leave your brain behind for now, I'll add more warnings later based on comments. To each their own, if this isn't for you, run away quickly tilde the next book will be better, wink. Brain storage point won't be returned even after reading, because it was eaten by zombies. Small tip. The guardian for each volume will be written in the volume's title. Clay. You skipped class to go fish blasting with Naruto again. Clay knows she was wrong. The little girl with blonde hair and elf ears hung her head like a quail, obediently taking the lecture. Incredibly practiced, admits fault at light speed, but never changes. I was the one who wanted to go. Don't blame Clay. The blonde boy next to her stuck his neck out, looking completely unfazed. Oh, so you think you're right. Uruka laughed out of anger, hands on hips, glaring at the two little ones. One looks very obedient, but actually runs off the moment you look away, thinking about dangerous things like fish blasting all day. The other was led astray and joined in skipping class, cheering from the sidelines next to the little girl. These two simply don't know the heights of the heavens. Uruka felt his temples throbbing, his head was starting to ache. Clay poked her fingers together in front of her chest while, accidentally, looking up with super aggrieved eyes, and Naruto next to her followed suit. All of Uruka's scolding got stuck in his throat. No matter how many times, Clay's trick always worked like a charm. He simply couldn't harden his heart. Uruka sighed, grabbed one in each hand, and hauled them back to school. Knowing they had escaped, little Clay and Naruto exchanged a look and giggled. On the way back to school with Uruka, the sounds of vendors shouting, residents chatting, and children laughing as they ran past flickered in Clay's ears. The little girl turned her head, she was now very familiar with this street. But she still remembered the helplessness she felt when she first arrived in this strange world. She had clearly promised Big Brother Kea that they would go to the Windbloom Festival together tomorrow. But in the blink of an eye, that promised, tomorrow, had flown to a distant, perhaps unreachable future. She missed home a little. She missed everyone in the nights, Big Brother Albedo, and her mother's gentle voice. But if she wanted to go home, her bright red eyes stared straight at the void in front of her, where there was a light screen only she could see. Complete all tasks to return to Tavit. Below was a progress bar filled to 1/10. She vaguely knew that tasks should be like commissions. As long as she completed the commissions mentioned above and made that black bar light up completely, she could go home. Thinking of this, the little girl perked up again. The commissions weren't very hard, except for the first golden task that had never been unlocked. The purple tasks that refreshed daily were things like help the grandma next door water her flowers, encourage little Lee to work hard on his training, and persuade Naruto to go out and play with you. Occasionally, blue tasks would appear, which weren't hard either. They seemed to appear after contacting others, all involving small favors. She enjoyed it too. After all, as the Spark Knight, she was supposed to help everyone. Fish blasting with Naruto was also playing with Naruto. Klee's gaze drifted for a moment, landing on a dark button nearby. She didn't know what it was, but every time she completed a task, the button would light up a bit. Maybe once it lit up completely, she would know what it was for. Oh right, there was also a line of words that was always shining at the bottom. Passive. Language universal. You can communicate with others without barriers. Passive. Cognitive blur. No one will think you are strange. Elf ears. Appearance that barely changes with age. Passive. Newbie protection time remaining. 4 years and 5 days. No one will discover your uniqueness, making bombs, the power of bombs, possessing the Dotako communicator temporarily unavailable. Unlocks after countdown possessing a pyro vision, wind glider invisible version. She didn't quite understand what it meant, but through these words, she vaguely knew she was very special in this world. There didn't seem to be visions here, but there were various strange ninjutsu and release techniques. And the magical chakra energy. Her talent was quite excellent. She quickly learned the transformation technique, substitution technique, and clone technique, taught by the teacher. Such magical things. When she gets home, she'll definitely give Big Brother Kaya a big scare. Clay giggled to herself. Uruka saw the little girl's happy look, and his furrowed brows relaxed. No matter how many times, he would always be affected by that sun-like smile. He mused in his heart. The distance to school wasn't far, and they soon returned to the classroom. The noisy chattering also came to an abrupt halt as Uruka stepped into the room. A pineapple head boy curled up in a corner sleeping opened one eye a crack, and was not surprised to see the two little ones being hauled back with their heads hanging. In fact, this scene had happened countless times in the past. He peacefully closed his eyes again and muttered, "What a drag." Klee's elf ears twitched, and she scurried over to the boy's side. "I heard that, Shikamaru." The little girl put her hands on her hips, not really angry, and sat in the empty seat next to him. She felt Shikamaru and Uruka sensei were a bit like Big Brother Kaya and acting Grand Master Jean, always liking to meddle. Every time she went fish blasting, she was caught by these two. Although Shikamaru grumbled about things being a drag all day, he never tired of grabbing her by the scruff of her neck and pulling her away from the river. No matter how many times she explained that Jumpy Dumpties wouldn't actually hurt her, it was no use. Clay, skipping class is wrong. The little girl with the Byakugan to her right tugged on her sleeve. Hinata was also a bit like Big Brother Kaya. Clay obediently lowered her head to admit her mistake. Well, she'd do it again next time. While Uruka lectured on the boring history of the ninja world on stage, Clay and Hinata were whispering below. Although the little girl was very shy, Clay was an extrovert. She could chatter on endlessly by herself, from birds in the trees to fish in the water, and her unfinished Jumpy Dumpties, it seemed everything in the world could become a new thing for her to share. Hinata responded very supportively, and Kiba Inuzuka next to her would chime in from time to time. Naruto in front of Clay and the cold-faced Uchiha boy beside him were arguing fiercely, though it was mostly Naruto's one-sided output. "You have no idea, the fish was this big. Shut up, loser. Hey, what's with that attitude?" Uruka's eyes twitched. He felt this class was beyond saving. Fortunately, there was Sakura Haruno, one of the few good kids in this class, who was still listening properly. Oh no, she was arguing with her best friend Ino about Sasuke. "I'm tired, just let it all end." However, when he saw Clay smiling so exceptionally happily, he felt healed again. Truly, a smile as bright as the sun. Forget it, they're all just children. He smiled helplessly, his gaze freezing when it caught a certain scene. "Naruto. You are not allowed to stand on the table." The chaotic theory class ended. The next class was shuriken throwing practice. The Uchiha boy hit the bullseye every time as usual, then walked to the side with his hands in his pockets, drawing a series of, "So cool," from Sakura Haruno and Ino behind him. Naruto, unsurprisingly, missed every target and stood to the side, huffing with anger. But when he saw the little blonde girl step forward, the resentment on his face quickly vanished. "Clay, go for it." The little girl smiled back, then grabbed a handful of shuriken and threw them all at once. As expected, they all missed, clattering into a pile beneath the target. Uruka facepalmed. He felt Clay was quite talented because, although the little girl couldn't hit the bullseye, she could accurately land them all in the same spot under the target. The main reason was Clay's throwing technique. While others looked for angles, hers followed a straight parabolic arc. It was just like just like she was throwing her Jumpy Dumpty. The middle-aged teacher let out a long sigh and habitually corrected Klee's incorrect throwing method. Then the little girl nodded and said she understood. She would still throw it the same way next time. Uruka had the foresight to guess this, but he couldn't say much and could only sigh again. Since taking over this class, the frequency of his sighs each month was more than in his entire previous year. Finally, school was over, and Clay pulled Naruto along as they dashed out. Uruka stood at the door, wearing a helpless yet bittersweet smile like a father. Ichiraku ramen tilde. Naruto chuckled foolishly behind Clay. Clay counted the money and stood on her tiptoes to place the bills on the table. Uncle Tuki, add extra noodles to Naruto's portion. Sure thing. The kind-faced owner smiled brightly at Clay. Ah, no matter how many times I see Clay, my mood always brightens up. Ayame, who was helping collect money nearby, took the opportunity to pinch Clay's cheek. No one could dislike such an enthusiastic and lively little girl. Clee's eyes crinkled into crescents. She also liked everyone here very much. Naruto watched the interaction with envy, then hung his head. Clay treats me every time. Clay hadn't ignored him. She waved to Ayame and then climbed onto the stool next to Naruto. It's okay, Clay has lots and lots of mora. She discovered that every time she finished those purple quests, a stack of bills would appear in her backpack, which had now accumulated so much she couldn't use it all. Naruto was busy eating and didn't find it strange that Clay called money mora. He knew the furry thing with a tail hanging from Clee's backpack was Clee's best friend, called Dodako. Mora was probably something like that too. I'm full. Thanks for the food. Naruto put down his bowl and pressed his hands together in satisfaction. Me too. Clay followed suit and put down her chopsticks. The two looked at each other and smiled. After saying goodbye to Naruto, Clay dashed off again. Outsiders aren't allowed in here. Sorry. A member of the guards wearing clothes with the Uchiha clan crest heard the sound and was about to shout sternly, but his tone softened when he saw it was Clay. Why? Clay looked up in confusion. Not long ago, she could still fish with explosives here. She had been caught red-handed by an Uchiha youth. That was the first Uchiha she had met who was exceptionally gentle and friendly. Later she learned that he was Sasuke's older brother, Uchiha Itachi. The guards member couldn't bring himself to be harsh and could only repeat, sorry. Okay. Clay wasn't the stubborn type. She nodded obediently and started walking back. For some reason, she had a lingering sense of unease. Clay patted her small face, cheered herself up, and walked downstream. It's okay, she'll just find another place to play. Clay skipped a few steps downstream but still looked back at the guards member with trepidation. She felt the atmosphere wasn't quite right. The little girl ran a hand through her hair, and her ahoge drooped. Forget it, don't think too much or my head will hurt. She shook her head and finally skipped out of the guards member's sight. Perhaps due to that strange, oppressive mood, she didn't have much fun today and walked back toward her temporary home, with her head down. A familiar figure entered her peripheral vision. Sasuke. Little Clay looked up and called out to the Uchiha boy who was returning late. What is it? Although young Sasuke usually acted like a cool guy who was top tier, he was a bit more patient with this warm and radiant sun-like girl than with others. Nothing. Clay shook her head. Are you just getting home now? Sasuke huffed but patiently explained. Yeah, training delayed me. Oh, then be careful on your way. Clay opened her mouth but swallowed the sentence. I have a bad feeling. The minor interlude passed, and Clay returned home smoothly. Setting her small backpack aside, Clay poked the furry thing hanging next to it. Dodako. Clay doesn't know why. The little girl placed her hand over her heart. It's beating so fast here. Is something bad about to happen? And that Uchiha uncle looked like acting Grand Master Jean after she's finished dealing with a pile of work. The little girl didn't know how to describe the emotion of anxiety, so she phrased it differently. She muttered all her thoughts to the furry toy and unknowingly became sleepy. Before sleeping, she habitually opened that light screen. Every night, seeing the familiar words, Tabit Continent, she could return to that city of freedom in her dreams and see everyone from the Knights of Favonius she missed so much. She missed home every day. It's okay. Clay mumbled while hugging her pillow, her eyelids growing heavier. Clay will definitely be able to complete all the commissions, and then go home. Suddenly, the light screen flashed, making Clay's sleepiness half vanish. The little girl rubbed her eyes and sat up. With bleary eyes, she was surprised to find the golden commission at the very top, twisting and changing. Comfort Uchiha Sasuke. Only this one looked no different from the usual purple quests. Clay blinked sleepily, not quite understanding why this golden commission, which she always thought would be very difficult, was so simple. Forget it, I'll think about it tomorrow. She turned off the light screen and fell into a deep sleep. The next day, Clay got up early and obediently washed up, brushed her teeth, and ate breakfast. Then, she put on her school bag and headed out as usual. Walking down this familiar street again, she habitually wore a smile and greeted everyone she passed. She received a response just like any other day, but Clay sensed that something was wrong. Before she passed by, the villagers were gathered in small groups of twos and threes discussing something. Upon hearing her greeting, they quickly scattered like startled birds, then forced a delayed, strained smile as they replied, "Good morning, Clay. Auntie, did something happen?" Clay stood on her tiptoes, leaning over the counter of a steamed bun shop to ask the kind-looking old woman inside. The old woman sighed just like the other villagers, then forced a smile and reached out to pat Clay's hair. Nothing happened. Go to school, little Clay. Clay nodded her head in confusion. It wasn't that she hadn't seen such expressions before. When Stormterror invaded and she asked Big Brother Kaya what happened and if she could help, Big Brother Kaya had that same expression. And the story of how Stormterror's invasion of Mondstadt was repelled by Big Brother Honorary Knight was something she only heard about later. Thinking of the golden commission she had seen last night. Clay wasn't stupid, she guessed there might be a connection between the two. She stopped skipping along leisurely and dashed toward the school like a gust of wind. Sasuke wasn't there. Usually, the boy who arrived early would be sitting in this seat, but today it was empty. Clay's footsteps paused for a moment, and then she sat back down in her own seat. The light screen opened before her eyes again. Comfort Uchiha Sasuke. The glittering golden text hung at the very top, and Clay stared straight at it. Suddenly, she noticed something different about this commission, compared to the purple ones. There was a small arrow after the text, and a line of small print in parentheses followed it. Click to track. She had been too sleepy last night and only noticed this feature today. Without a second's hesitation, little Clay reached out and poked it. Bling! A small, golden glowing arrow suddenly appeared before her, pointing in a certain direction. Is this Sasuke's direction? Clay's eyes lit up, and she looked up. She had arrived early and Iruka hadn't come yet, so after a moment of hesitation, the little girl hopped out of the window and headed straight in the direction the small golden arrow was pointing. The blonde little girl with her backpack dashed through the streets, her two pigtails swaying behind her head. As luck would have it, she ran right into Iruka, who was on his way to school, at a corner. Clay. Iruka only felt a gust of wind rush past him. It was only when he looked closely at the fiery red blur that he realized it was a person. Where are you going? Class is about to start. The little girl had already run far away without looking back. That direction is. Iruka identified the way she went, vaguely understood something, and sighed again. Konoha Hospital. Clay stopped in her tracks. The small arrow was pointing directly inside this building. She looked up and identified the words on it. Hospital. Clay muttered to herself, why did Sasuke go to the hospital? Without thinking much about it, she walked inside. The arrow led her through many twists and turns, finally pointing to a hospital room. The little girl didn't stop for a second, and just as she was about to dash into the room, a medical ninja grabbed her backpack strap. Clay, you shouldn't disturb the patients. Clay stopped and looked back with a pitiful expression. Clay won't make any noise. My classmate is inside, and Clay is worried about him. The medical ninja crouched down, and meeting Clay's sincere gaze, her heart softened. All right, but Clay must be very quiet. The patient. She used an explanation a child could understand. He isn't feeling very well and needs to rest. Clay knows. The little girl nodded obediently and was finally allowed through. She walked in quietly and immediately saw the boy on the hospital bed with his brows furrowed. He looks so pained. Clay turned her head and silently shared her thoughts with Dodako. The golden quest was flashing before her eyes, impossible to ignore. But Sasuke was sleeping, and Clay couldn't wake him up. The little girl stared at the golden text, but it just kept flashing without any change. The light screen vanished, and Clay moved closer to Sasuke. Last night, did something happen? She remembered her particularly bad premonition from last night and her heart beating faster than usual. When Sasuke wakes up, I'll ask him. Having made up her mind, Clay stopped disturbing the boy who still had his eyes tightly closed on the bed and placed a fluffy thing she had made herself next to him. This is a little Dodako, Clay said softly in her heart, I hope you get well soon. After making her wish, Clay put on her backpack and tiptoed out of the hospital room. She ran all the way back to school, but despite that, she was still late. However, Uruka just looked at the little girl silently and sighed yet again, not scolding her. Go on in, Clay. As soon as Clay sat down, Naruto in the front row turned around noisily. Clay, why are you late today? Did you oversleep? And why didn't that stuck-up guy show up? Clay was in a bad mood and just shook her head. Sorry, Naruto. Clay's head is a bit messy. Let's talk after class. The little son's gloominess was too obvious. Shikamaru didn't even lie down on his desk to sleep at the start of this class. Instead, he took a deep look at the empty seat and then fixed his gaze on the little girl with her head drooping, muttering with a sigh, what a drag. Clay didn't care about the outside noises or the looks being cast her way, she just silently opened the light screen. Then she was surprised to find that the golden text at the top had changed. Comfort Uchiha Sasuke completed. Rewards pending, click to claim. Clay blinked. Was it because of the little Dodako? But it's great that it could help Sasuke. Her mood improved slightly, and she poked, claim. Then she saw the bright bar that occupied 1/10 of the screen dash forward a bit more. It was now about 12/100ths. Also, that button she wasn't sure what it was for lit up a bit more. Clay stared straight at the light screen. After all, this was the key to her going home. The words at the top twisted and underwent a change. This time, it wasn't just a single line, but a list, and prefixes had appeared in front. Main Quest 1. Pass the graduation exam and graduate from the Ninja Academy. Main Quest 2. Have a conversation with Kurama. Main Quest 3. Participate in the Chunin exams. Main Quest 4. Prevent the Konoha plan. The purple quests below now had the prefix daily quest added, while the blue ones had side quest added. But Clay's head was spinning from looking at it all. Besides the first one about graduating from school and the third one which she had vaguely heard about, who on earth was Kurama, in the second one? She didn't seem to know him. And the fourth one made her feel even more lost and confused. As she agonized over what the fourth line of the mission might be, time flew by, and before she knew it, class was over. As soon as the bell rang, Naruto scurried over to Clay's side. Is Clay in a bad mood today? Naruto, as always, asked whatever was on his mind. Hinata also cast a concerned look. She had been worried all through class but hadn't mustered the courage to ask. Clay nodded, then shook her head. I saw Sasuke at the hospital. He looked like he was in a very bad mood, but Clay doesn't know what happened. Oh, right. The little girl turned around and patted the desk of the yawning pineapple head. Does Shikamaru know what happened? Although Nara Shikamaru usually kept a low profile and his test scores were always mediocre, whenever Clay had a question, she could always get an answer from him. Therefore, in the little girl's mind, Shikamaru's level of capability was greater than anyone else's. Ah! Shikamaru lifted his eyelids, his eyes half squinted, looking very drowsy, yet his gaze was full of clarity. Sasuke, huh? Looking at the little girl who was thirsty for knowledge, he felt like he was facing an almost unsolvable problem. It was a headache. How could he tell Clay in a particularly tactful way? He couldn't think of one. Shikamaru lazily closed his eyes. You could go ask the person himself. He swallowed those two words back down. That proud and arrogant Uchiha might not necessarily take Clay's feelings into account. Sigh, what a troublesome mess. He knew very well that for a ninja destined to walk a bloody path, Traits like innocence, kindness, and sincerity would be worn away as they grew up and moved forward. But he, and not just him, but also those troublesome adults and elders, actually felt a special sentiment when facing Clay. They didn't want the sun to lose its luster. They wanted Clay to grow up slowly, even slower, to just remain a carefree little girl forever, rather than becoming a ninja. Have you thought about dropping out? With his thoughts racing, these words almost blurted out. By the time Shikamaru realized something was wrong, it was too late to take them back. Before Clay could react, Naruto was like a lit fuse. Hey! What are you saying? Shikamaru opened his mouth, not daring to look up at Clay's expression, and dejectedly lowered his head. Sorry, my mind is a bit of a mess. I wasn't asking you. Clay just leaned on the desk, her large red eyes wide and round, showing none of the sadness or anger Shikamaru had expected. The little girl said seriously, word by word, Clay won't drop out. Clay will graduate together with everyone. Because her dream was to become a free-spirited and powerful adventurer just like her mother. She had never been that fragile. Neither in body nor in spirit. So, Shikamaru doesn't need to treat Clay like a child, okay. Sasuke is Clay's friend. No matter what happens, Clay wants to know. Shikamaru couldn't even pretend to sleep anymore. He looked up, startled. Though they were just a child's eyes, the light within them was so intense it felt as if it could burn him. Hey, he chuckled helplessly. Alright then. The boy sat up and said softly, Sasuke, he lost his very important family and his clan last night. Clay was stunned. Then is he very lonely right now? Just like when she first arrived in this strange world. No relatives in sight. Shikamaru was silent for a moment, perhaps. Compared to the emotion of loneliness, right now, what filled Sasuke's heart should be hatred. Ever since Shikamaru started explaining, Naruto had gone mute, his face wearing an expression similar to Clay's. The little girl was dazed for a long while before belatedly thinking to ask the reason, what happened to make him lose his family. Shikamaru suddenly didn't dare to speak. It felt like there were little people fighting inside him. He gritted his teeth and steeled himself to tell the truth. His brother did it. His brother killed their parents and the entire Uchiha clan. After those words fell, the scene lapsed into a dead silence. Little Clay just blinked blankly. Out of the corner of her eye, a flash of red appeared, and only then did she realize her hands were trembling. That person, that Uchiha youth who seemed so easy to get along with, how could it be? She didn't believe it. The little girl was innocent and simple, but her eyes could see through all kindness and malice. She didn't believe that such a friendly person would do something like this. It's a lie, right? Before Clay could speak, Naruto muttered first. Then the reckless boy stood up abruptly, about to rush outside. Anticipating this, Uruka, who was leaning by the window, grabbed him. Where do you think you're going? Naruto struggled. I'm going to find Sasuke. The scene was chaotic, yet it also revealed an abnormal stillness. Clay slapped the table and stood up, pressing down her uncontrollably shaking hands. Naruto. Let Sasuke be alone for a while. After saying that, the little girl returned to her seat and sat there in a daze. She was never stupid, which was why she didn't want to think about it or dig deeper. But she knew very clearly that Shikamaru would not lie. At this time, at this moment, today after last night. Before the innocent sun, a corner of this world's cruelty was finally unveiled. The light screen opened at some unknown point. Clay stared blankly at the line of text. Complete all missions to return to the continent of Teyvat. Teyvat had things called monsters. Those creatures were violent and crazed, attacking anyone who passed by. So, could Itachi have also been contaminated by something, which is why? But no matter the reason, the fact that he committed such a horrific act remained an indisputable fact. Clay buried her head in her arms, not wanting to think anymore. She missed home again, that carefree safe harbor. But compared to the heavy emotions in her own heart, how sad must Sasuke be, having to face all of this for real? Thinking of this, Clay sniffed and sat up straight again. When Sasuke wakes up, she'll go and ask him what he thinks. Having made up her mind, Clay finally regained a bit of her vitality. However, after experiencing Shikamaru's bombshell, no one in the class was in the mood for the lesson. This was especially true for Sasuke's two little fangirls. Ino rested her chin on her hand and let out her fifth sigh of the day, looking quite like she was following in Iruka's footsteps. Alright, Shikamaru couldn't stand the gloomy atmosphere any longer. Let's go visit Sasuke together after school. This suggestion was met with unanimous agreement from everyone. The scene finally regained some of its usual bustle. Iruka followed Ino's sigh with one of his own. These kids. Just after school, a group of people ran out noisily. Ino went to wrap flowers, Hinata quietly suggested buying fruit, and Choji turned to pack some barbecue but was grabbed by Shikamaru. Patients can't eat food that's too greasy. Oh, Choji's head slumped. At dusk, it was that same medical ninja again who intercepted 11 little rascals outside the ward. The patient needs rest. Facing 11 pairs of sparkling little eyes, she gave in once more. Fine, the patient is awake, but don't make a racket and upset him. The 11 little heads nodded like pecking chickens, and they were successfully allowed in. The boy on the hospital bed stared blankly into the void. Even as 12 people poured in, he didn't show any other expression. His emotions seemed so twisted that they ultimately manifested as a blank slate on his face. The fluffy little Dodako Clay had left last time was still there, neatly placed by his pillow. Sasuke-kun. Billboard brow. Don't get so close. Oh tilde Sasuke-kun. Sakura Haruno and Ino pushed and shoved their way to the bedside. They had prepared words of comfort all along the way, but they couldn't say a single word when they met those dark eyes that were almost terrifying with hatred. Instead, Clay squeezed her way to the bedside and clumsily offered comfort with her limited vocabulary. Don't be sad. The little girl's eyes were exceptionally sincere. She said haltingly, I, and everyone, and Dodako are here for you. So, you aren't alone. Sasuke turned his head slightly. The words, what do you know? Were swallowed back the moment he made eye contact with Clay. He clenched his hand on the bedsheet and spoke in a raspy voice, it's none of your business. After saying that, he turned back and continued staring at the ceiling. Hey, what's with that attitude? Naruto couldn't stand Sasuke responding to Clay's concern like that and pushed forward angrily. Then, reacting a beat late, his anger instantly vanished. He stammered for a while before saying, fine, I won't blame you this time. He turned his head away, finding it extremely difficult to say a word of concern. Why you, get better soon. Seeing Sasuke like this, the others didn't know what else to say. They all left after offering a few dry words of comfort. Clay stayed behind. She was still clinging to the bedside, staring straight at Sasuke. The two of them lingered like this for a good while until the sky outside turned completely dark. Sasuke spoke first. Go away, I don't need your concern. He turned to look out the window. The darkening night looked just like that nightmarish evening. He closed his eyes, feeling a sharp pain surge through his mind. You have no value in being killed, foolish little brother, if you want to kill me, hate, loathe, and then live an unsightly life. Run, and then cling to life. The mocking and ridiculing words seemed to echo in his ears over and over again. Suddenly, a childish voice rang in his ear, but you kept Dodako, you didn't throw it away. The voice wasn't loud, but it was exceptionally clear. The voice that had been haunting his ears suddenly faded. Sasuke opened his eyes and turned around. The little girl's eyes were still so burning and bright, as if no matter how bottomless the darkness, it could not extinguish them. He was suddenly speechless. Clay's eyes were still wide and round as she said very seriously, I know everything that happened. Clay will definitely help you give that guy a good beating. Sasuke twitched the corner of his mouth and gave a light huff. What do you know? You wouldn't understand. That kind of pain, that kind of hatred, that unspeakable anger, it was like a wildfire that wanted to burn him to ashes. What could this innocent and simple little girl understand? Clay shook her head. Clay really doesn't understand, but Clay knows you're sad, so Clay will definitely help you. You won't be alone. Sasuke fell silent, not daring to look into Clay's eyes again, only feeling that his heart, numb with pain, had suddenly become strangely warm. He covered his head with the blanket as if escaping. Whatever. Having received his acknowledgement, Clay's eyes finally lit up, and she skipped back, relieved. The little girl skipped away without looking back, unaware that at the end of the hallway behind her, an old man's figure was buried deep in the darkness. His wrinkled hand tremblingly held a pipe, and he let out a long sigh. Uchiha, sigh. Little Clay, with a child like this in Konoha, I can rest easy. He lowered his eyes and turned into the darkness with a complex expression. Clay turned back as if sensing something, but there was no one behind her. She tilted her head in confusion, didn't think much of it, and left the hospital. After that day, Sasuke soon returned to school, but he seemed like a different person. He threw himself into training almost frantically, rarely responding to others' attempts to talk. Only when Naruto was particularly disruptive or Clay chattered to him would he mutter a word or two. This strange atmosphere between them lasted for a long time before it finally eased. 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. Clay sat obediently outside the classroom, a brand new forehead protector tied around her right arm. The 3 basic jutsu weren't difficult for her, she performed them easily and received the forehead protector symbolizing a ninja from Iruka. Now she was waiting for Naruto's exam results. She swung her legs a bit out of boredom and opened the Akasha screen. Main Quest 1. Pass the graduation exam and graduate from the Ninja Academy. Main Quest 2. Participate in the Chunin exams. Main Quest 3. Stop the Konoha Crush plan. The second objective, have a conversation with Kurama, had already disappeared, symbolizing that the task was complete. The completion of this task felt like a total accident to her. That day, she and Naruto had skipped class as usual to go blasting fish. The accident happened in an instant. Naruto lost his footing and fell into the river, and she hurried to pull him out. During the struggle, Naruto suffered a minor injury. Afterward, they were strictly ordered not to skip class to blast fish for many days. The two of them were well behaved for a few days, but after just a few days, they reverted to their old habits. But that wasn't the point. The point was that when she went to sleep after making a wish that night, she entered a completely unfamiliar space. In that space, she saw a super huge orange fox locked behind bars. It was as big as Stormterror. Clay still remembers how wide her mouth hung open at that time. Wow! Such a big fluffy thing. Clay scurried right up to the cage and curiously poked her little head inside. Then the fox opened its eyes, which were filled with nothing but brutality and hatred, leaving the little girl stunned. Get out! It coldly spat out a word and closed its eyes again. And then the task was completed. Yes, it was just that abrupt. However, that wasn't the last time she saw the big fluffy one. In the days that followed, she entered that space in her dreams almost every few days and saw that big orange fox. Because the mission was completed, she learned its name was Kurama. So, she called the fox by its name and chattered with it, just like she did with Dodako. Aside from the first time he heard her call out, Kurama, when the fox snapped his eyes open and demanded to know how Clay knew his name. Though the little girl couldn't explain anything, he eventually found that Clay only talked about childish things and closed his eyes to lie back down, uninterested. However, as time went on, Kurama was shocked to find that he didn't dislike the little girl at all. Unaware that he had been affected by the daughter slave buff, he would occasionally respond to Clay's words. Even though it was just stuff like, oh, boring, or, how many times are you going to say that? Clay was already very happy and never tired of chatting with the fluffy one. She really loved fluffy things. At that thought, Clay squinted her eyes and shook her head. What made her even happier was that the black bar was already 1/5 lit, she could see the dawn of her return home. Not only that, she discovered that after completing certain purple and blue missions, strange scrolls would appear in her inventory in addition to money. She divided these scrolls into 3 categories. The first type was passive scrolls. After she opened one, a new line of text would automatically appear on the light screen. Now, it had added passive, natural affinity. All creatures will have an initial favorable impression of you. Passive, double luck. You were already lucky, and now you're even luckier. Passive, learning ability up. You can easily learn most ninjutsu and memorize theoretical knowledge. Passive, energy recovery. Your chakra refinement speed is 3 times faster than an ordinary ninja's. Passive, genjutsu immunity. All genjutsu are ineffective against you. The passive, Newbie protection had disappeared yesterday because its timer reached 0. The second type was active scrolls. After she opened one, it would disappear and reappear in a virtual form on the light screen, followed by an introduction and a prompt asking if she wanted to use it. For example, purification, one time, purify one negative effect of the target, selectable. Lie becomes truth, one time, the target will firmly believe your next lie, duration, 10 minutes. There were only these two for now, but they seemed incredibly powerful. As for the third type, they could technically be grouped with the second. They were mostly miscellaneous ninjutsu scrolls, which appeared most frequently. For instance, Water Wall, no chakra version, uses. 211 Great Fireball, no chakra version, uses. 125 Water Dragon Bullet, no chakra version, uses. 179, and so on. She could even adjust the size of the release. She usually used the Great Fireball to roast fish. Although most of the fish blasted up were more than well done, there would occasionally be a lucky one or two. Shaking her head, Clay pulled her thoughts back and turned to look at the door, which was still tightly shut. She wasn't actually worried about whether Naruto could graduate. Although it had been very difficult for Naruto to perform the 3 basic jutsu 3 years ago, for some unknown reason, his mastery of ninjutsu had suddenly improved recently. At least during the past few days of training, Naruto had performed the 3 basic jutsu very smoothly. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the blonde boy rushed out of the room with an excited face, the forehead protector on his brow brand new and shiny. Let's go eat at Ichiraku Ramen to celebrate, Clay. My treat this time. Naruto was exceptionally happy. Clay's eyes crinkled as she turned off the light screen and replied, okay. Unsurprisingly, all 27 little radishes in this class graduated smoothly. Oh, wait, they couldn't be called little radishes anymore. They had grown into green teenagers. However, Clay was still just as small, but because of her passive skill, no one noticed. On the day the team placements were announced, everyone gathered in the classroom in scattered groups, waiting expectantly. Even Shikamaru Nara, who usually slept in the corner, had perked up. He wasn't particularly excited, though, his gaze swept over the crowd from time to time, his brow furrowed. I really want to be on a team with Sasuke-kun. Ino gushed beside him. Shikamaru shattered her dream. According to the Ino Shika-cho tradition, the 3 of us should be one team. Ino instantly wilted. I know, just let me fantasize for a bit. But, she thought of something and looked up again, looking at Shikamaru in confusion. What are you thinking about? Are you facing some difficult problem? You've been frowning this whole time. Shikamaru let out a breath, his tone somewhat helpless. It's nothing, I'm just thinking about the team placement results. He quickly gave up on his brooding. Forget it, it's not for us to worry about. We'll find out soon enough. Soon, Uruka arrived to announce the results. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Sakura Haruno, Uchiha Sasuke. The room instantly erupted into a clamor, with Naruto's voice being particularly loud. Why do I have to be in a group with this stuck-up guy? I want to be in a group with Clay. Uruka put his hands on his hips angrily. I told you, this is to balance the strength of each group. Sasuke is the number 1 student among the 27, and Naruto, you're the dead last. Sasuke gave a light snort. Just don't drag me down, dead last. Naruto gritted his teeth. What did you say? You fool. Uruka gave a long sigh, sounding weathered and accustomed to this, and continued reading the list. Team 8, Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, Hinata Hyuga. Please, look after me. Hinata greeted her future teammates in a soft voice. Team 9, Kawakami I, Fujiwara Tomo, Clay. Remembering them as 2 quite easy-going classmates, Clay waved to them and received enthusiastic responses. Team 10, Nara Shikamaru, Ino Yamanaka, Akamichi Choji. As expected, Ino hung her head in dejection. After the list was announced, the Jonin instructors came to claim their potential future students. Yes, only potential, as there was still an elimination mechanism. If they couldn't pass the test, they still wouldn't become official genin. Soon, Clay heard her name. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw the person who had arrived. The ninja before her had a pineapple-like hairstyle that was almost a one-to-one replica of Shikamaru Nara's. If Shikamaru hadn't already been taken away by his own instructor, he would probably be very surprised right now. Because this ninja was none other than Shikamaru's father, Shikaku Nara. Follow me. Shikaku Nara had no extra expression, he simply dropped those words and walked out. The little girl stood up, waved goodbye to everyone, and followed along with her two temporary teammates. In a quiet little corner, the four of them sat in a circle. Well then, let's introduce ourselves first. I'm Nara Shikaku. Things I like. I'm not telling you. I hate trouble. Nara Shikaku spread his hands, a corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. Ah, there's really no helping it, he just couldn't stay serious when looking at little Clay. Kawakami I like barbecue. I don't have anything I hate for now. My dream is to become a powerful ninja. Fujiwara Tomo. I really like studying. I hate slimy food. My dream is to become very strong. The two boys spoke one after the other. Children of this age all have similar dreams. Nara Shikaku nodded, not at all surprised, then looked at the little girl who hadn't introduced herself yet. Clay tilted her head. My name is Clay. I like fluffy things, like Dodoko, and I also like fish blasting. Clay hates crabs, peeling the shells is super troublesome. My dream is to go home. The little girl lowered her head despondently. Clay doesn't want to say. It's alright, Nara Shikaku didn't overthink why the little girl said that, assuming it was just shyness or something. He resisted the urge to pat Clay's head. Even though you've successfully graduated from the Ninja Academy, it doesn't mean you've become qualified genin yet. The two boys voiced their confusion in unison. You still have to pass my test. Nara Shikaku stood up. Let's go to the training ground now. While the two boys were still dazed, Clay had already followed him step by step. Hey, are you Shikamaru's daddy? Nara Shikaku couldn't help but feel happy upon hearing the little girl's childish and innocent voice. She was much cuter than that mature brat at home. How did you tell? Clay answered with great confidence. You look exactly like him. The two boys following behind exchanged a blank look, suddenly feeling a bit redundant. Amidst the back and forth conversation between the two of different generations, they soon arrived at the training ground. Seeing Nara Shikaku stop, Kawakami couldn't help but raise his hand and ask, what kind of test is it? Nara Shikaku had already suppressed the smile on his face and became serious. Now, attack me with every means you can think of. The three little ones' eyes widened at the same time. What are you still standing there for? Nara Shikaku tried his best not to let his gaze drift toward the little girl's cowlick, his tone stern. Enemies won't give you time to daydream. As his voice fell, the two boys finally scrambled into action. One threw a shuriken, the other fumbled with a kunai, and they almost bumped into each other. Nara Shikaku's mouth twitched, feeling that this team was a bit of a disaster. Clay was even more so, she was still rooted to the spot, looking up and asking, is it like the sparring at the Ninja Academy? Nara Shikaku had already restrained the two boys with one hand each, without even using ninjutsu. Hearing Clay's question, he hardened his heart. Wrong. Imagine me as your enemy. On the battlefield, if you stand still like this, your comrades will lose their lives. He placed the two back in their original spots with one hand each. And you two, do you still think this is playing house? You won't be able to pass my test like this. I'll have no choice but to send you back to the Ninja Academy. I'll give you one more chance. This is your last chance. The three little ones looked at each other and finally got serious, each of them perking up. Clay was still calculating in her heart. Enemies, like those bad abyss fluffies. Yeah, Clay understands. Seeing Kawakami and Fujiwara Tomo already charging out, Clay silently pulled out a bunch of Jumpy Dumpties. This was her recent improved version, which hadn't been put into practice yet. Since she wasn't quite sure about the range and power, and was worried about blowing up her two teammates, Clay watched the battle carefully, waiting for an opportunity. Almost in an instant, Nara Shikaku used a substitution technique, and the two boys lost their target, nearly causing another blunder of bumping into each other. However, Clay observed very clearly from a distance. She spotted Nara Shikaku's landing point at a glance and threw the bomb with quick hands and eyes. Worried that one wasn't enough, she even threw a chain of them. Nara Shikaku saw the cute round balls flying toward him from afar. Having heard about Klee's fish blasting record, he didn't let down his guard and quickly formed hand seals. Another substitution. But he clearly still underestimated the range of Klee's bombs. Along with a huge explosion, a heatwave burst out within a 10-meter radius. Kawakami and Fujiwara Tomo were affected even while standing at the edge. Fortunately, Clay reacted quickly. A light screen flashed before her eyes, and a water wall blocked the front of the two, just barely protecting them. Nara Shikaku appeared in the distance looking quite disheveled. Although he wasn't injured, he was indeed startled. Strange, why hadn't he noticed the power of Klee's bombs was so fierce before? Is this really something a little girl can make? A thought flashed through his mind, and some long-ignored suspicious points slowly surfaced, causing him to knit his brows. Before he could think further, the three little ones had already taken their stances and charged again. Realizing that her bombs couldn't cause actual DMG to Nara Shikaku, Clay breathed a sigh of relief while also taking advantage of the lingering dust to silently bury a round ball in the ground. She had seen it in a book. This is called a trap. Clay clearly knew that their head-on charge was almost useless, so just before reaching Nara Shikaku's side, she performed a clone technique. At the same time, she pulled one boy with each hand, using the visual gap created by the clone technique to pull them into the woods behind them. Knowing it was Clay pulling them, the two didn't struggle and followed her into the forest. Nara Shikaku was holding back. He knew that if he didn't, a single shadow sowing, Black Licorice would have the three of them lying in a row. He wanted to see what they were going to do. But now that he had a moment, he had time to think about the question he just had. Although his high favorability made him not want to doubt Clay, this little girl was a bit too special. It was mainly reflected in those jumpy dumpties with almost terrifying power. No matter how cute the appearance, it couldn't change the fact that it was a weapon with massive destructive power. In fact, because there was no chakra fluctuation, it looked very harmless. If such things could silently appear in other hidden villages in the form of toys. Nara Shikaku shuddered, realizing he was thinking about something very terrifying. He pressed his temples and let out a deep sigh. The war is over, this isn't something he should be thinking about now. As for Clay, forget it. Her original intention was just to blast fish. Although this goal seemed never to have changed, the little girl never thought about doing bad things. He had seen very clearly the concerned look the little girl threw when the dust settled. His head started to ache again. He thought of that old man standing on the Hokage rock overlooking Konoha. Beneath those wrinkled eyelids, those eyes remained clear. Never mind. Surely Hokage-sama is aware of all this, which is why he was assigned to lead Klee's team. While Shikaku was pondering the true meaning of life, the three little ones were huddled in a circle in the forest, whispering to each other. Clay spoke first. We can't beat Teacher Shikaku like this. Kawakami scratched his head. Then what should we do? Fujiwara Tomo added. If you ask me, having three newly graduated ninja fight a Jonin with combat experience, there's no way we can win. He's just making things difficult for us. He just thinks we're too weak and doesn't want to lead us. Doesn't he hate trouble? Maybe he just hates us, Tomo concluded, his tone impatient, words coming out without a second thought. Clay shook her head, not swayed by Tomo's emotional words. Our combined strength can't match teachers, so if that's the case, none of us will pass the test. There must be another way. Listening to the little girl's serious muttering, the hot blood that had rushed to Fujiwara Tomo's head gradually cooled down. He realized his thinking was too narrow-minded. Once he calmed down, logic reclaimed the high ground. Strength. What if he's not testing our strength? He joined the discussion. Kawakami was still in a fog. Ah. Then what is it? Clay nodded her small head. Yeah, Clay thinks if it were just a test of strength, a spar at the Ninja Academy would have been enough. Tomo rubbed his chin, lost in thought. True. He only needs to do one-on-one, yet he made us go all at once. Together, the three of us. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in his head. 3 people. Oh, I get it. Teacher is testing our teamwork. He looked at Clay and thanked her sincerely. Good thing you're here, Clay. I almost let my emotions get the better of me. Clay twiddled her fingers shyly. Hee hee, it's because big brother Tomo is very smart. I was still dazed. What's going on? Fujiwara Tomo had completely calmed down. His intellect was among the best in the class, but his strength was mediocre, his hands couldn't keep up with his brain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have noticed Shikaku's movements while attacking with Kawakami Eye only to have his limbs tangle up and get caught so easily. However, this didn't hinder his brilliance in tactical decision making. If the test is our teamwork, we need to show teacher Shikaku our coordination. Clay raised her hand. Clay just buried 3 jumpy dumpties near that big rock, 3 trees back. Fujiwara Tomo's eyes lit up. Excellent. We can build our plan around that trap. Next, we'll do this, and then this. Although Kawakami I was confused, he wasn't a troublemaker, he knew he just needed to be obedient right now. So, for every sentence Tomo spoke, he and Clay would nod their heads in unison. The tactical discussion was completed in a very short time. To be honest, it was mostly Tomo talking while the other 2 cheered him on with, and, okay. Tomo placed a hand on his shuriken pouch, ready to go. Next, do exactly as I said. 3, 2, 1, go. Kawakami I was the first to rush out using the clone technique. With several phantoms and a face full of burning passion, he had the momentum of a vast army. Shikaku had already turned his head the moment sounds came from the forest, finished discussing. He was quite curious about what the 3 little ones had come up with in such a short time, so when I rushed forward, he quickly formed hand seals without holding back. Shadow Possession Jutsu. The shadow beneath his feet extended rapidly, accurately hitting Kawakami Eye's true body and forcing him to a sudden halt. Almost in a heartbeat, Fujiwara Tomo lunged out from behind. He was well read and knew this was the Nara clan's unique secret technique. Guessing its range was limited, he gave Ai a hard kick, sending him flying to break the technique's control. Kawakami Eye clutched his backside as he scrambled up. Ow, ow, ow. Hey, take it easy. Tomo had no time to deal with him, throwing shuriken while retreating toward the direction where Clay had set the trap. Shikaku raised an eyebrow and, out of curiosity, gave chase. When they reached a certain spot, little Clay finally popped out, throwing a string of small round spheres at Nara Shikaku. Knowing these things were even more terrifying than explosive tags, Shikaku sidestepped and retreated, which happened to force him right into the trap's range. Shikaku realized something was wrong the moment he heard a click. His hands moved so fast they were a blur, barely managing to conjure an Earth-style mud wall before the explosion. Boom. The sound wave and heat wave spread together. The solid wall didn't last long before being destroyed. Shikaku used a substitution jutsu just in time to dodge the triple wave explosion. The man's figure appeared nearby, looking even more disheveled than before, his eyes momentarily unfocused. Clay poked her worried little head out. Despite being within the blast radius, the little girl didn't have a speck of dust on her clothes. She even had time to cast a concerned look. Teacher, are you okay? Do I look okay to you? I feel like I'm about to see my ancestors. Shikaku's eyes went dead. He felt Clay could go straight to being a Chunin. With the power of these bombs, any Jonin who failed to react in time would be blown to bits on the spot. He took a deep breath, finally pulling his runaway thoughts back together, realizing these 3 had pulled off a piece of coordination. Though it wasn't perfect, for fresh graduates, they had done very well. Shikaku's gaze fell on the 3 little ones looking at him anxiously. Teamwork, caring for friends. Thinking of Fujiwara Tomo's merciless kick to Kawakami Eye's butt, Shikaku's thoughts froze for a moment. Well, I suppose that counts as caring. Most importantly, the 3 of them didn't have arrogant, self-centered personalities. Shikaku let out a soft breath and finally spoke. Alright, I declare that you've passed. Well done. There was another critical point. He didn't know how many bombs Clay had left. If they kept fighting, not only might he lose face, but if this forest ended up full of holes, the compensation would be a fortune. The 3 little ones looked at each other, then their eyes lit up simultaneously as they cheered and hugged. Hooray! The celebration had to wait, because Shikaku had just thought about the forest, and Clay's bombs were all fire attributed. Set the mountain on fire, and Cleese retired. Watching the fire start to spread, Clee's pupils dilated as she suddenly remembered a certain knight's survival rule. Clay caused trouble again. The little girl hurriedly used a water dragon bullet to extinguish the fire. Fortunately, the fire wasn't large, and one water dragon bullet was enough to douse most of it, leaving behind charred marks on the wood. Nara Shikaku breathed a sigh of relief seeing the fire extinguished, then suddenly realized something and looked at Clay in shock. When she used that ninjutsu just now, and during the chaos earlier when he caught a glimpse of a water wall, Clay hadn't used any hand seals at all. Just now, Shikaku realized his mouth was a bit dry and couldn't help but swallow hard. Was that ninjutsu you just used? Clay didn't know why Shikaku's attitude was a bit strange, but she was a good girl, so she admitted it openly. It was Clay. Is something wrong? Shikaku fell silent, because silence is Cambridge tonight. Cough, wrong script. He racked his brain, trying to pluck a few words from his vast sea of knowledge to form a tactful question. Finally, he gave up and asked directly, Clay, why don't you use hand signs when you use ninjutsu? Clay looked at him blankly, her mind reacting a beat late that he was referring to her use of scrolls. She realized that, ninjutsu without hand signs, was very special. Although she was very small, she knew some things couldn't be exposed, like the light screen, those skills, and her home. It wasn't that she had tried to tell her trusted friends, but the words would automatically be muted as they reached her lips, and a line of text would pop up before her eyes. Disclosure of matters concerning the other world is prohibited. Since then, she understood that she couldn't speak of certain peculiarities that only existed on the continent of Teyvat. So the little girl hesitated for a moment and then shook her head. Clay doesn't know. Shikaku fell into deep thought. He didn't doubt the little girl, he just thought of a possibility. In truth, hand signs aren't strictly necessary to release ninjutsu, they are merely a means to control chakra more easily to perform the technique. But one-handed seals were already the mark of a genius. Seal-less ninjutsu, this was the first time he had ever seen it. He suddenly realized that Clay might be a ninja with terrifying talents. Clay was very well suited to be a ninja. Shikaku reached a conclusion, but looking into the little girl's well-behaved and innocent eyes, he couldn't feel happy at all. He even felt it wasn't a good thing, even though Konoha village had gained another genius. He didn't want Clay to see the other side of this world, full of slaughter and cruelty, and even less did he want the little girl to step into it. He knew he was being selfish, but at this moment, he truly shared the exact same thought as his son. But Clay had already graduated and couldn't drop out, nor could he take back what he had just said. Clay was already a member of his squad. Clay looked at Shikaku blankly. Is teacher unhappy? Was it because she used ninjutsu without hand signs? Then maybe she should just make a few seals for show in the future. The concern in those beautiful red eyes was as sincere and genuine as ever. Shikaku looked away as if burned. Forget it, he'd deal with the future when it came. For the first time, he had the urge to stop overthinking. Tossing those messy thoughts to the back of his mind like he was giving up, he said, No, Clay is very impressive. Teacher was just a little surprised. Alright, let's go eat yakiniku to celebrate. It's on me. Hearing this, the three little ones immediately forgot the strange atmosphere from before and cheered together, yay. Under the large sign that read Yakiniku Q, the three little ones happily rushed ahead while Shikaku trailed slowly behind, his gaze fixed on their backs. Sigh, they're still just children. He sighed, unable to resist being infected by their joyful atmosphere, a smile tugging at his lips. Inside the shop, they ran into Team 10, who had also just finished their evaluation. The Ino Shika Cho trio heard the familiar childish voice from afar and turned to greet Clay. Hi, Clay. Then Shikamaru spotted the familiar figure behind the three of them, his pupils dilating in shock. Dad. Shikaku waved, acknowledging him, and stepped forward to give Shikamaru's head a vigorous rub. What? Surprised to see me? No, Shikamaru said, holding his head. I just didn't expect you to be the Jonin instructor for Klee's team. Asuma laughed heartily at their interaction. Since we happened to run into each other, let's sit together. Hearing this, Ino couldn't wait to wave Clay over to sit next to her. Each of them liked little Clay, and not just because of passive, natural affinity. Beyond that subconscious liking, they preferred the little girl's sun-like warmth, her helpfulness, and her exceptionally easygoing personality. They had a very pleasant meal, chatting away until Higurashi, before reluctantly heading back to their own homes. Strolling through the streets back to the Nara clan grounds, neither the large nor the small pineapple head spoke. A silent atmosphere spread between them. Halfway home, Shikamaru couldn't help but lower his hands from behind his head and let out a deep breath. You noticed too, didn't you, Dad? Clay isn't suited to be a ninja. Shikaku didn't respond immediately. He just patted the shoulder of the young but mature boy. You're still young, Shikamaru. Don't go around sighing like that. After saying that, he returned to the main topic. But before the words could leave his mouth, he followed up with a sigh of his own. Sigh. But Shikamaru, do you know? The man's gaze as he looked straight ahead was deep and complex. She is very talented. She is powerful. Shikamaru scratched his head, nearly pulling his hair out, his expression frustrated. I know, but. There are no buts. Shikaku's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. He didn't use much force, but the weight of the gesture was heavy. This is the path she chose. Shikaku's voice was calm. There are some things she must face. Stop treating her like a child. Shikamaru looked up, his gaze deadpan. You're clearly treating her like a child too, Dad. The truth hit Shikaku like an arrow to the knee. His eyes shifted. Well. As they spoke, they had already reached their front door. The father and son looked at each other and then let out a collective sigh. Sigh. What will be, will be. Shikaku turned his head. The night was as dark as ink. Beneath the calm surface, one couldn't tell when a storm would be born. Perhaps it was already quietly sweeping in, or perhaps it was in the very distant future. The current situation of the ninja world. He only hoped that no more wars would break out. The man's eyes were filled with worry. The unclear future was like a fog that made one's heart uneasy. A woman's voice, gentle yet full of threat, came from inside the room. Why are you back so late? Holy crap. Shikaku and Shikamaru's expression stiffened. They looked more serious now than when they were discussing the previous topic as they exchanged glances. You go in first. No way. You're the one who should face mom's wrath. The two exchanged looks, as if this problem was even more serious than what they had just been discussing. The woman inside called out again. The two jumped, stopped hesitating, and walked in as if heading to an execution ground. We were wrong, we were wrong. It's because the celebration ran a bit late. We won't do it again. Inside the house, pleas for mercy could be heard repeatedly. Outside the window, the night was silent. After officially becoming genin, they began taking missions under Shikaku's guidance. Since they had just become genin, the missions they could take were nothing more than helping villagers catch cats and dogs, weeding and fertilizing, or finding lost items. Clay enjoyed it immensely. Not only did every mission trigger a blue quest, but she could also complete her daily purple quests along the way, which was exceptionally convenient. Influenced by Clay's tireless enthusiasm every day, the other two had no complaints at all, even finding it very happy to do any mission with the little girl. Under the influence of a good mood, their efficiency was extremely high, and the mission quotas they completed each week were nearly 1.5 times that of other teams. Shikaku hadn't expected that the team he took over would actually be so worry-free. Every time the three little ones did a mission, he would watch from afar, so he could clearly see that they had already faintly formed a circle centered around Clay. No conflict, no arguing, hard working without complaint, and even enjoying themselves. Shikaku felt like he was living in a dream. It wasn't that he hadn't led a team before, nor that he hadn't seen others lead teams, but this was the first time he had seen one so worry-free. After all, just a few days ago at the mission assignment counter, he had seen the scene of Naruto pestering Kakashi to go on high-level missions. Without comparison, there is no DMG. Shikaku was more than satisfied. The three little ones didn't cause him any trouble, and since Clay had thrown herself into the missions, she rarely went fish blasting anymore. It was simply the height of being worry-free. Such peace, such good days tilde. Shikaku leaned against the wall basking in the sun, watching the three little ones weeding with great fervor. It couldn't have been more pleasant. Just at a time like this, a fixed NPC would refresh nearby to disturb him. Wait, wrong script. The old man wearing the Hokage robe walked slowly to his side and leisurely took out the pipe he was holding. Shikaku. He reached out to stop the man who was about to salute. Shikaku stood up straight. Is there something you need from me, Sandaime-sama? Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't look at him, but instead gazed from afar at the three little ones working happily, his expression kind. However, Shikaku knew very well that the old man's aging eyes remained clear. What are your thoughts on that child, Clay? The Sandaime asked directly. Shikaku wasn't surprised by this question. Well, Clay is a good child. The Sandaime was stunned for a moment, then laughed heartily, murmuring Shikaku's words back. Yes, she is a good child. Shikaku lowered his eyes. She has many qualities that many ninjas lack. Kindness, innocence, a love for helping others, optimism, and cheerfulness. She is not suited to be a ninja, but, Shikaku looked up, his gaze steady, she is very suited to be a comrade you can trust with your back. Shikaku didn't mention the strange things about Clay at all. If the Sandaime didn't ask, he wouldn't say. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a deep drag of his pipe. I understand. Then, I'll leave Clay to you, Shikaku. I trust you. After saying this, the old man looked away and walked back step by step the way he came. Only his straight back seemed to hunch slightly. Nara Shikaku calmly watched the third Hokage leave and slowly closed his eyes. Ah, his good mood was gone. Thinking of the Chunin exams that would soon be held in Konoha, Shikaku pressed the back of his hand against his forehead and opened his eyes to look up at the crystal clear blue sky. Hokage-sama, what does he mean by that? Thinking of this year's star-studded lineup, Shikaku frowned. Was he asking the newly graduated genin to participate in this year's Chunin exams? Knowing the terrifying power of Klee's bombs, if that were the case, Shikaku wasn't worried. After all, it wouldn't be his students who got hurt. Sunagaker. I hope there won't be any trouble. He heard the little girl's cheerful voice, turned his head, and saw the three little ones running from afar. Practice makes perfect. They were already very skilled at weeding, and they finished the task in no time, receiving warm praise from the homeowner. Well done, Shikaku thought for a moment and decided to reveal what was about to happen. Do you know that a major event is about to take place in Konoha? He paused, waiting for the three little ones' reaction. The three looked at each other and then cried out in confusion together, Shikaku chuckled, his heavy mood lifting slightly, as he looked at the three with a smile. Perhaps the two boys hadn't noticed, but after spending so much time with Clay, their personalities had taken on some of the little girl's traits, not childishness, but rather a bit of lingering innocence. It's not like they're that old anyway. It must be because I've spent too much time with that brat at home that I'm no longer used to how kids this age should act. While thinking, Shikaku introduced the matter of the Chunin exams to the three. After hearing Shikaku's detailed introduction, the three were quite excited, and the boisterous Kawakami had already started chattering away. Hey, can we participate in this exam? Fujiwara Tomo was also very excited but thought more deeply, won't we lack experience? We've only done some D-rank missions so far. Though they did them with tireless enthusiasm. The little girl blinked. It sounds so lively. Clay wants to participate. She remembered that her current main quest one was to participate in the Chunin exams, after completing past the graduation exam and graduate from the Ninja Academy last time, that progress bar had already reached 3/10. She estimated that after completing this, it would reach 2/5. Clay was eager to try. Shikaku rubbed each of their heads, being perfectly fair, I'll talk to Hokage-sama. It doesn't matter if you don't get promoted to Chunin, just treat it as a learning experience. Although Klee's strength was definitely at the Chunin level or even reaching Jonin, the little girl was still far from sufficient in terms of combat experience and other aspects. He could only wait and see. To be honest, Fujiwara Tomo in the team was quite smart, but he had no talent for learning ninjutsu. He understood the principles, but when it came to practice, he was a mess. Even the hand signs for the three basic jutsu took him forever, and his fingers were almost tying themselves in knots. As for Kawakami, one could only say he was mediocre with no special skills, just a young boy who liked eating meat. He would likely be eliminated within a few rounds. However, overall, he held quite high expectations for this team. Although Team 9's floor was quite low, if they cooperated well, they might have a miraculous effect. The sun was already setting in the west. Shikaku waved his hand, dismissed. Watching the three little ones skipping off together for a meal, Shikaku couldn't help but chuckle. Even though he was someone who quite hated trouble, facing the three of them, he actually felt that teaching them for a lifetime might be quite nice. The Chunin exams. Shikaku pushed off with his toes and leapt toward the Hokage building. I'm looking forward to your performance. I heard that Team 7 encountered some really powerful ninjas on that C-rank mission they took. Today, the three little ones completed their tasks with extremely high efficiency. Shikaku, thinking of giving them some time to relax, simply released them early. The three of them were now chattering away on the road. After dozens of days of working together, they had become very close friends. The one who brought up the topic was Kawakami Eye. That just means they're really strong, Fujiwara Tomo said, scratching his head. He didn't have even a hint of jealousy toward his powerful peers, having been completely infected by Klee's optimism. Now, even if he failed a ninjutsu training 100 times, he wouldn't feel very sad. The Chunin exams are coming up soon. Why haven't I seen any ninjas from other villages around Konoha lately? Kawakami Eye's topic switched extremely fast, his thoughts leaping ahead. The other two kept up just as quickly. Their daily conversations were always like this, jumping from one thing to another. One second they were discussing what raw materials Clay had found that were suitable for making jumpy dumpties, and the next they were talking about where to eat dinner. Clay was also curious about ninjas from other villages. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe we'll see them in the next second. Speak of the devil, at the next corner, they ran straight into a confrontation between Team 7 and the Sand Ninjas. Clay tilted her head in confusion, not sure what was happening on the scene, but she immediately spotted Sasuke acting cool while perched in a tree. She was the type to ask whatever came to mind, so she zipped right over. Sasuke, why are you standing in a tree? Did something happen? Suddenly, she felt an intense gaze fall upon her and turned her head blankly. Staring at her was a boy with very distinctive red hair, large dark circles under his eyes, and the character for love carved into his forehead. Red, the boy murmured softly, his eyes turning terrifying as if he had been triggered by something. A pebble suddenly shot down in front of him. Sasuke, up in the tree, knitted his brows. Hey, stay away from her. The boy slowly curled his lips into a terrifying smile, completely ignoring Sasuke's words as he stared intently at Clay. You, what is your name? Although Clay was still dazed, being looked at with such eyes made her feel exceptionally uncomfortable. She took a few steps back. My name is Clay. Hello. Perhaps it was Clee's friendly attitude or some inexplicable friendship level at work, but the boy withdrew his smile and frowned with some confusion, despite having no eyebrows. Gaara. He spat out his name without answering the little girl's question, then turned to leave. The two sand ninjas beside him, Tamari and Konkuro, instantly breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Gaara like that, they had been worried blood would be spilled on the spot. They were just fearfully and hesitantly wondering how to stop him when Gaara reined in his killing intent on his own. Though they didn't know the reason, it undoubtedly allowed their racing hearts to settle, and they hurriedly followed after him. Hey! You're not allowed to leave. Naruto was still fuming. Sakura Haruno frowned. Why would sand ninjas appear in Konoha? Tamari gave a light huff and looked back. Didn't your squad's Jonin tell you? After saying that, she didn't explain further, walking away with her arms crossed and leaving the still confused Team 7 behind. Although he didn't know why the two groups were at each other's throats, Fujiwara Tomo could answer that question. He quickly stepped forward. It's because of the Chunin exams. They're here to participate in the Chunin exams. Chunin exams. Naruto was puzzled. It was the first time he had heard that term. Fortunately, the top student Sakura Haruno knew what it was. Didn't Kakashi-sensei tell us to go find him? It's probably related to this. After chatting for a few more moments and confirming everyone was alright, Team 7 reluctantly bid farewell to Clay and headed toward their designated meeting point. Watching them walk away, Fujiwara Tomo couldn't hold out any longer, his legs went weak and he slumped to the ground. That was terrifying, those ninjas from the hidden sand village. Seemingly remembering Gaara's gaze, Fujiwara Tomo shuddered. Are we actually going to take the exam with people like that? Even Kawakami-I, usually the most carefree, clutched his head in a bit of fear. Clay, who had faced the boy directly, was actually the least afraid. The little girl patted her chest. It's okay, Clay will protect you. After being momentarily startled by Gaara's gaze, she had quickly calmed down. After all, Gaara's killing intent was far from what she had felt when she first met that big fluffy giant fox. Thinking of that big fox, Clay hadn't seen it for a while and actually missed it quite a bit. I hope I can dream of the giant fox tonight. Clay made a silent wish. Seeing that Fujiwara Tomo was still shaking violently, Clay stuffed one of her newly developed Jumpy Dumpties into his hand and comforted him very seriously. Don't be afraid, Jumpy will protect you too. Fujiwara Tomo silently looked at the small round ball in his hand, which was even cuter than the last one. Thinking of the power of this little thing, he shuddered. That's even scarier, hey. However, thinking that it was a gift from Clay, Fujiwara Tomo felt inexplicably relieved. He carefully placed it into his ninja tool pouch, only then realizing that his pounding heart had slowly calmed down. Clay continued to rummage through her backpack and pulled out two small red round balls, giving one to each of her teammates. It was the first time the two had seen small balls of this design, and they looked at Clay in confusion. This is also a Dodako, Clay introduced seriously. Since they often heard Clay muttering about her best friend, they both knew what Dodako was. Kawakami-I held the small round ball with both hands, his eyes shining, providing plenty of emotional value. Is this for us? Seeing Clay nod, the young boy immediately jumped up in joy, tossing all fear to the back of his mind. Thank you, Clay. I'll treat it as my best friend too. Clay giggled. This is the Dodako communicator gadget. Communicator. Fujiwara Tomo immediately caught the most crucial word in Clay's sentence. Clay nodded. The Dodako communicator can bring Clay's words to you. So when it rings, remember to answer it. Fujiwara Tomo turned his head only to see Kawakami-I grinning like an idiot, his eyes filled only with the joy of receiving a gift. He silently turned his head back, no longer looking at the silly boy. After understanding Clay's meaning, he immediately realized the immense value of the Dodako communicator. Clay didn't explain the range of the communication, but if it were very small, she surely would have said so. Fujiwara Tomo's expression dazed for a moment. Such a precious gadget, you're just giving it to us like this. What are you saying? Clay put her hands on her hips. You are also my precious friends. If friendship levels could be visualized, at this moment, Clay had already maxed out the relationship bar with the two boys. Waving goodbye to the two young boys who were moved to tears, Clay opened the light screen. Today's purple tasks were almost complete, with only the regular encourage Little Lee to work hard at training left. Little Lee, this big brother had left a particularly deep impression on Clay. Not only because of his green jumpsuit, but his hairstyle also looked particularly like a watermelon. Every time she met him, the boy would be running laps around Konoha, shouting excitedly about youth and hot-bloodedness, and occasionally she would even see him running on his hands. Clay saw an even greater vitality in Little Lee than she did in Big Sister Amber. Thinking as she went, Clay climbed onto the Hokage rock and saw Little Lee from a distance, drenched in sweat from his workout. Clay waved her hand and shouted, "Keep it up, Brother Lee." The light screen flickered and faded away along with the line "Today's tasks completed." Hearing the familiar voice, Little Lee turned his head and responded with an equally loud voice. Okay. I've been encouraged by Clay, I'll run 5 more laps. The first time she heard this, Clay was very confused, but today she was already used to it. She knew Little Lee was someone obsessed with training and self-improvement, and she watched as he increased his speed and ran off into the distance. Well said, Lee. This is youth. A 1-to-1 replica with a bowl cut followed closely behind, wearing a larger-sized green jumpsuit. His expression was carved from the same mold as Little Lee's, and he even had time to give Clay a thumbs up while running. Thank you for always encouraging my disciple, Clay. Clay returned a smile and waved, seeing off these 2 bowl cuts, one big and one small. She was very happy to know these two friends, so even if the encourage little Lee to work hard at training task hadn't appeared, she would still come here every day to check in. Honestly, those two have endless energy every day. A female voice came from behind. Though the words were a complaint, the tone was full of laughter. Clay turned around. Sister Tenton. The girl with her hair in buns leaned down, her eyes sparkling, and rubbed the little girl's soft cheeks. Your mouth is as sweet as ever, little Clay. Clay blinked her eyes, her whole face being squished and kneaded. She mumbled out a mispronounced sentence. Where's brother Neji? Him. Tenton finally let go. He's at the other training ground. Everyone is working so hard, Tenton sighed. Clay rubbed her ravaged face. Is it because of the Chunin exams? Tenton didn't deny it. That's part of it. By the way, I heard a few classes from your year are also participating, right? The girl had a hint of worry between her brows, but Clay just gave a big smile. Clay is very strong. Tenton let out a soft breath. The Chunin exams are very dangerous, little Clay. Looking at the bright and confident smile on the little girl's face, Tenton couldn't bring herself to say those words of discouragement. Finally, she just leaned down and hugged the little girl. All right, if we run into each other, I'll protect little Clay. Clay didn't quite understand, but she still reached out to return the hug. Then Clay will protect Sister Tenton too. Tenton didn't say anything, but rubbed Clay's face again. What a cute kid. Much cuter than those two green frogs of youth in her team and the cold-faced Hyuga Neji. If only she were her teammate. Tenton was fantasizing when Might Guy passed by with little Lee again, flashing a row of white teeth at her. Tenton, you have to work hard too. After saying that, he continued running forward. Tenton sighed and patted Clay's small head. Then I'll see you at the Chunin exams. Bye-bye, little Clay. Goodbye, Sister Tenton. Little Clay covered her head and bid farewell to Tenton, who went to chase after the youthful master and disciple in her team. Standing atop the Hokage rock, Clay watched the backs of the few people disappear in the distance. Just then, the white feather on the little girl's beret swayed gently. It's the wind. Clay silently closed her eyes. Lord Barbados, please bless me. Well, even though Clay isn't in Teyvat anymore, please bless Clay to pass the Chunin exam smoothly. Oh, right, also bless Clay to quickly finish all the commissions and then go home. Far away in another world, Venti sneezed silently. I only sneaked a glass of death afternoon. It's not like I didn't pay the Mora. Is there really a need to keep thinking about me? Unaware that the Anemo Archon, who had received her wishes, attributed it to someone nagging him, Clay spent the night memorizing theoretical knowledge for the Chunin exams. Yes, all night, specifically, not even half an hour. Although she had learning ability up, theoretical knowledge was still too boring for Clay. She felt sleepy after just a few glances. It's okay even if I don't pass, right? The little girl silently rationalized for herself. Anyway, the teacher said to just treat it as a learning experience. Thinking of this, Clay put the book down without hesitation. Okay, no more memorizing. Clay fell asleep immediately. After a long time, she entered the dark space in her dream again and saw the giant orange fox in the cage. Kurama, long time no see. Clay excitedly grabbed onto the cage. The fox half opened one eye, snorted, buried its head in its paws, and ignored Clay. Fortunately, after spending a lot of time together, Clay knew this big fluffy thing had a tsundere personality, so she coaxed in a soft voice. I'm sorry, Kurama, I didn't know when I'd be able to see you. The little girl's voice was already crisp, and it was even more irresistible when she deliberately acted spoiled. Kurama opened his eyes and felt like he was doomed. He hadn't escaped this place yet, hadn't taken revenge on the evil Uchiha yet, and he was already about to fall into the hands of a little girl. Actually, he was already doomed, it was just his personality that made him unwilling to admit it. Clearly, that Naruto kid was also a brat when he was little, but why did Clay give him a completely different feeling than Naruto did? Kurama was completely puzzled. Seeing the big fox open its eyes, Clay knew Kurama wasn't actually angry. Her eyes curved into crescents. Big Fluffy, talk to me. Hearing this familiar childish nickname again, Kurama closed his eyes, wanting to pretend to sleep. After getting familiar with him, Clay had also become bolder. The first time Clay called him that, he was so angry that, this old man is a tailed beast. To hell with the 6 paths sages, Fluffy. Was on the tip of his tongue. But when he met the little girl's expectant gaze, he forced it back, turned away indignantly, and snorted, "Get out." He couldn't even bring himself to say a scram. Since he didn't stop her the first time, every time Clay called him that afterward, he was so embarrassed he buried his face, wishing his fur was long enough to cover it. Fortunately, after being called that many times, he had developed some resistance. After a while, he raised his head. "What?" Clay blinked her eyes and began sharing her stories as usual. "Clay is telling you, Clay will be participating in the Chunin exams very soon." The little girl poured out topics she found interesting like beans from a bag. Even though Kurama wasn't interested in most of what she said, there was something magical about Clay's voice that made him unable to stop listening. Like an elder listening to a child recount the joys and sorrows of school, the entire fox exuded a benevolent aura that was almost eerie for a tailed beast. And also, Clay leaned her head against the iron bars, listing her experiences like treasures. Clay met a strange red-haired person today. Seeing him felt, just like the first time Clay saw Kurama. Kurama narrowed his eyes slightly, he knew who that person was. When he felt that familiar aura, he had opened his eyes to probe the outside world, spotting the red-haired youth at a glance. The vessel carrying Shukaku, the Ikibi Jinchuriki. Out of his loathing for that stinking tanuki, he snorted and rarely interrupted Clay. "Little brat, stay away from him." Clay looked up innocently, her eyes widening in pleasant surprise, not even caring about what Kurama had actually said. That's the first time Kurama has said so many words. Kurama turned his head away awkwardly, burying it back down and refusing to make another sound. Clay wasn't surprised and continued chattering away until she felt a pulling force, realizing she would have to leave soon. So she waved her hand, her face always brimming with a smile. "Goodbye, Big Fluffy." As usual, there was no response. Only when the space returned to dead silence did Kurama slowly open his eyes, looking toward the direction where Clay had disappeared with a complex expression. Total darkness. He lowered his head in silence, once again feeling like he was finished. He had actually begun to look forward to every meeting, even harboring the thought that staying here for a lifetime wouldn't be so bad. This old man is a tailed beast. How can I have such pathetic thoughts? Kurama felt like he was going mad, slamming a claw against the cage with a loud clack. Ripples spread out across the water, but the echoes only brought back emptiness. Next time Clay comes, I should talk to her a bit more. A thought quietly sprouted and then grew wildly out of control. He stared blankly at the endless darkness outside, then slowly buried his head again. After a long time, a mournful cry echoed through the vast ceiling space. It sounded like a sob. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the Chunin exams. Clay pulled her 2 teammates along, rushing toward the exam venue. She had been so excited yesterday that she accidentally stayed up late. Today, she was only woken up by the 2 boys knocking on her door. While climbing the stairs panting, Clay was grabbed by Kawakami Eye. Clay, you're too nervous and about to climb past it. It's on this floor." Clay looked up at the door sign in confusion, it wasn't the exam room's number. Then she looked bewildered at the angry Naruto outside the classroom, Sasuke acting cool, Rock Lee holding one of Sakura's hands, a dazed Sakura, Tenten with exaggerated acting, and Neji staying out of it. "Clay, isn't the exam room upstairs?" Clay asked with a face full of confusion. Outside the door, the 2 Chunin whose genjutsu had just been exposed by Sasuke were about to cancel it. They stopped when they saw more people arriving, exchanging glances upon hearing Clay's words. Both saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Kawakami-I was also dazed. It's not here. Fujiwara Tomo patted his shoulder, letting chakra flow into the boy's body to help him dispel the genjutsu. It's a genjutsu. It must be a test. He hadn't realized it at first either, only understanding the reason after hearing Clay's words. Although she didn't know what was happening on the scene, Clay habitually greeted everyone. "Good morning, everyone. Goodbye, everyone." Then she pulled her 2 teammates and headed upstairs. They left behind a group of people on that floor looking at one another, the atmosphere becoming momentarily awkward. When they rushed into the exam room, Clay realized they had arrived quite early. People were gathered in small groups, and the sound of hushed chatter was constant. Clay spotted her acquaintances in the crowd at a glance, so she pulled Tomo over. Kiba, Hinata, Shino. Good morning. The three members of Team 8 turned around at the sound. Inuzuka Kiba replied with a smile. Good morning, Clay. Long time no see. Shino adjusted his sunglasses, muttering to himself, you can still be happy now, but that might not be the case in a bit. If you ask why. The others were used to ignoring him, but Clay was persistent every time, correcting him. You just need to say, good morning, back to Clay, Shino. Shino Aburame paused, fine. Good morning. His voice remained as flat as a stagnant well. Hinata patted her heating face and finally mustered the courage to be the third to speak. Gee, good morning. She couldn't help but feel shy every time she met Naruto and Clay. For Naruto, it was because of the secret affection in her heart that made the young girl's face flush. As for Clay, it was because the little girl had encouraged her every day during their time at the Ninja Academy, talking to her warmly about everything. Those beautiful red eyes were as hot as the sun. It made her want to get closer, yet she couldn't find the courage. Clay didn't understand these inner complications. She smiled and tugged on Hinata's sleeve. Hinata can speak a bit louder, but Clay can hear you even if you're very quiet. The little girl winked playfully at her. Hinata felt heat suddenly surge to her cheeks. Her face was so hot it felt like it could fry an egg, and then she fell straight back with a thud. Kiba caught her with one hand and facepalmed. Sigh, Hinata is still so easily embarrassed. Clay poked her fingers together, smiling sheepishly. Amidst the laughter, she felt an intense gaze that seemed to have been staring at her for a long time. Clay turned her head blankly and once again saw that red-haired youth with the terrifying eyes. Only this time, in the turquoise eyes looking at her, the killing intent had faded significantly, replaced mostly by confusion. Clay tilted her head, having already thrown Kurama's warning to the back of her mind, and gave the youth a friendly smile. The youth's gaze froze. Not knowing what he saw through Clay, his expression suddenly became very strange. In the next second, he turned his head away and stopped looking at her. Now it was Clay's turn to be confused. But she wasn't confused for long, as the late arriving Team 7 drew the attention of everyone in the room. As the three of them chattered excitedly with their former classmates who had graduated with them, they were led aside by a gray-haired young man who appeared out of nowhere. Everything after that happened very quickly. The gray-haired young man somehow provoked several Otogaku ninja and had his glasses knocked off by a sound wave. The proctor for the first exam appeared at that moment, scolding them back to their seats with thunderous authority. Sitting on the wooden chair with the test paper spread out before her, Clay's expression was still blank. The dazed Clay glanced at the questions and became even more confused. Even though she hadn't studied much, was this really the kind of content covered in books? Clay clutched her head, feeling like her CPU was about to burn out. She remembered the examiner's deep hatred for cheating and knew she'd be finished if she were caught. What? You say it's fine as long as you cheat secretly without getting caught. Clay is a good girl, she would never do something like that. The honest little girl had no idea that this was actually a test of information gathering. Poking her cheek with her pen, her entire expression collapsed. She couldn't do a single question. No wonder teacher Shikaku said to treat it as a learning experience. It turns out one has to solve such difficult problems to become a chunin. Does that mean Clay will be a genin for the rest of her life? Clay made a bitter face and looked up, only to be stunned into silence. A dazzling variety of bizarre methods were being used. Dozens of cheating techniques in one examination hall left the sheltered little girl wide-eyed with shock. That sand eye was so obvious, and there was such a large mirror on the ceiling with light flashing everywhere. Akamaru was barking so frequently. If he wasn't giving answers, what was he doing? Clay turned her head in silence, only to see several examiners sitting upright, with no intention of pointing anything out. The little girl felt her worldview being challenged. However, not long after, she felt light flicker in front of her. Realizing it was the mirror, she subconsciously looked up. The answers were revealed directly before her eyes. Question mark. Exclamation mark. Clay quickly lowered her head, muttering in her heart, cheating is wrong, cheating is not how a good girl behaves. The light flickered again, appearing somewhat puzzled. After confirming the little girl wouldn't look up again, it moved away regretfully. Clay stared at the black ink on white paper for a long time, but still couldn't squeeze out a single word, her head drooping in dejection. She thought of her teammates. Fujiwara Tomo is so smart, he can definitely write them down. Clay is going to hold them back. The little girl became even more depressed. However, in the next second, she felt her head spin, and her consciousness slipped into darkness. When she came to her senses again, Clay rubbed her eyes. Did I not sleep well yesterday? Am I too tired? Muttering to herself, the little girl looked down, and all her thoughts were instantly blown away. The answer sheet was filled with answers, word for word, in dense handwriting. Clay's eyes widened. She remembered this handwriting, it belonged to Ino. A bit of shame crept into her heart, and the little girl quickly turned her head. Those examiners were still sitting straight, looking ahead without any reaction. It wasn't Clay who wanted to cheat, so it's not Clay's fault. Clay muttered softly in her heart, checked the paper several times, covered her face, and like Hinata, buried her head like a quail. Clay can't betray Ino, so be it, I'll just pretend Clay wrote it. After finishing her mental preparation, Clay looked up and saw the time on the blackboard was almost at its end. The fierce-looking chief examiner stood up and announced the rules for the final question. If one person gives up, the whole team gets a 0. If one person can't do it, the whole team is finished together and will be stripped of the qualification to take the Chunin exams in the future. The room erupted in an uproar. A few brave souls stood up to protest, but under Ibiki Morino's terrifying gaze, they sat back down dejectedly. Time flowed second by second, and the atmosphere on site began to grow tense. Soon, someone couldn't take it anymore, stood up, and fled the examination hall as if escaping. Clay didn't think it mattered much because she didn't have much desire for promotion, her ultimate goal was just to go home. But thinking of her two teammates, the little girl began to feel conflicted. Her two teammates were sitting not far in front of her and didn't look like they were going to stand up. Clay pursed her lips and chose to stay. Little did she know that at this moment, both boys were worried that if they gave up, they would drag the little girl down. It was a bit of a mutual misunderstanding. Seeing more and more people leaving, Naruto suddenly slammed the table and stood up, delivering a long, hot-blooded declaration that made many who were about to get up hesitate and sit back down. Ibiki frowned imperceptibly. Quite a few people stayed. But since no one else chose to give up, he had no choice but to announce the news that everyone who remained had passed. Before everyone could celebrate for long, the examiner for the second exam burst through the window, bluntly stating that the second exam was about to begin. The Forest of Death, huh? That sounds really scary. The three youngsters of Team 9 huddled together, and Kawakami whispered, but we already passed the first exam, we're already pretty amazing, hee hee. Fujiwara Tomo nodded. The Forest of Death, it's a very large area. If there are no surprises, the second exam should be an elimination round, we just don't know the rules yet. A forest. Clay's focus was unique. Does that mean I can go fish blasting? Clay hasn't gone fish blasting in a long time. Thinking of the terrifying commotion the little girl had caused while fish blasting before, the two boys shuddered. Fujiwara Tomo scratched his head, his expression stiff. Ha, ha ha, maybe next time Clay, we still have an exam to take. Amidst their whispering, they arrived at Training Ground 44, where the examiner Enko Mitarashi began to announce the exam rules. Heaven and Earth Scrolls. Fujiwara Tomo rubbed his chin. So it's not just a test of strength and teamwork, but also luck. Kawakami patted his shoulder nonchalantly. It's fine, we have little Clay. Clay has super good luck. Tomo paused for a moment, thought of something, and nodded in deep agreement. True, then there's no need to worry about that. They could even fantasize about picking up a scroll while walking. Shaking his head, Fujiwara Tomo tossed that somewhat unrealistic idea aside. The primary task is to reach the central tower. We'll head there as soon as we go in. We'll see if we run into anyone on the way. If not, we'll just block people at the end. The other two youngsters nodded, having no objections to his tactics. So, after receiving the scroll of heaven, the three youngsters went to the entrance belonging to their team. As soon as the gate opened, they rushed inside. Perhaps because they had caught so many cats and dogs, their speed was not much slower than other ninjas. However, the two boys never quite understood why Klee's running posture involved her arms swinging across her body, because for ninjas, keeping them behind the back reduces a lot of drag. But Klee's speed wasn't much different from theirs, so although they were puzzled, they didn't ask. In fact, Clay didn't understand either. Wouldn't keeping both hands behind your back make you lose balance and fall flat on your face? Seeing everyone else running like that, she realized she was special. Scratching her head, she didn't ask any more questions. It was normal not to encounter anyone at first, since everyone was heading toward the center from the outer perimeter of the circle. But strangely, even though they were halfway through the journey, the three youngsters still hadn't encountered a single soul. During the break, Tomo simply sketched out the remaining route on the ground. It seems we can only intercept people near the central tower. But to the surprise of the three of them, the way they obtained the scroll was neither through robbery nor traps, and they didn't even need to intercept anyone. Just on the way to the tower, Clay picked up an earth scroll on the ground that happened to match their scroll. It must have been discarded by a team that didn't need it. Tomo's eyes widened like copper bells at that moment, completely unable to comprehend that something he had previously thought had a 0% chance of happening was actually occurring before his eyes. Clay shook the two scrolls, the sunlight filtering through the leaves and falling into her eyes, adding a bright touch to her smile. Great. Now we can go straight to the central tower. Tomo's expression was dazed as he nodded blankly. What on earth did he design all those tactics and plans for? A ninja in the monitoring room, who was watching the surveillance in his spare time, couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of water, staring at this scene in shock and silence. After a long while, he sat back down wordlessly. Forget it, luck is also a part of one's strength. The three little ones proceeded just as before, not encountering a single person and accurately avoiding even the toxins in the forest, arriving at the tower with ease without having done anything. When Iruka appeared and saw the three little ones, who were uninjured and only had a bit of dust on them, he was completely dumbfounded. Kawakami scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. Hee hee, our luck was pretty good. We didn't run into any danger and even picked up a scroll. The rules didn't say we couldn't, right? Does this mean we passed? Uruka's mouth twitched. Looking at the expectant gazes of the three little ones, his lips moved, but nothing came out. Sigh. He held his forehead for a while, the encouraging words he had prepared getting stuck in his throat, but he still reached out and hugged the three children. Congratulations, you have successfully passed the second exam. And they were in first place. It was so smooth that he didn't even know what to say. The three little ones cheered and, after excitedly bidding farewell to Iruka, dashed into the tower. The environment here was dark and somber, which quickly dampened their high spirits. After not frolicking for long, they found a bench and sat down in a row. But the three little ones weren't the type to stay idle, and they soon huddled together, chattering away. Before they had chattered for long, Clay sensed a familiar gaze and instinctively turned her head. It was that red-haired boy, with half his face buried in shadow, but Clay could feel that his gaze was fixed right on her. Clay tilted her head and then tentatively reached out to wave hello. Kankuro and Tamari both looked at her in shock, then cautiously glanced at Gaara. The boy had no reaction and didn't respond, he just stood there silently watching Clay for a long moment, then withdrew his gaze and wordlessly led Kankuro and Tamari past them. Before his figure was about to disappear into the darkness, he suddenly spoke, saying something without context. That scroll, I was the one who dropped it. Then, without waiting for the three little ones of Team 9 to respond, he vanished into the darkness without looking back. Leaving the three little ones staring at each other, completely baffled. What does he mean? Kawakami asked in confusion. He was still very afraid of that sand ninja named Gaara. His eyes were too terrifying. I don't know. Fujiwara Tomo also looked dazed, maybe it was just a whim. I feel like that's someone we shouldn't provoke. Kawakami nodded in deep agreement. Clay didn't offer an opinion, just tilted her head and watched the direction the three sand ninjas had left. At this moment, she finally belatedly remembered Kurama's warning. Although she didn't know the reason, the giant fox wouldn't harm her. There was only darkness at the end of the passage in front of her. It seemed those three had already gone far away. Clay blinked and withdrew her gaze. She had a feeling that there was a second half to Gaara's nonsensical sentence that went unsaid. Just as she thought. Gaara indeed had a second half to his sentence, which was originally intended to be, "I will kill you with my own hands in the next match." But for some reason, when he met the little girl's innocent eyes, those words were forced back down. He was almost bewildered by the strange emotion rising in his heart. He could never forget that the last person who had shown him such unconditional kindness had betrayed him with his own hands. He detested this warm feeling and didn't want to look directly at those startlingly bright red eyes again. So he left without hesitation, almost as if he were fleeing. With the boy's face cold, Kankuro and Tamari didn't dare speak, nor did they know the strange thoughts in his mind. The two of them exchanged looks. Tamari. What kind of madness is Gaara having now? Kankuro. I don't know, why don't you ask? Tamari. I don't dare, do you? Kankuro. Don't talk nonsense. The boy's cold voice came from ahead. Do you two have any opinions? The siblings instantly jolted. Tamari laughed nervously. Ha, ha, no, our eyes are just a bit sore. Kankuro nodded hurriedly. Yeah, no opinions at all. Gaara lowered his eyes uninterestedly and didn't speak again. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Out of the 26 teams that passed the first round, only 24 individuals remained to reach the third round. Since the number of people was still a bit high, a preliminary match was to be held to narrow down the 24 to 12. Kabuto, the gray-haired youth who had been talking to Naruto earlier, raised his hand and proposed to withdraw. Even Naruto's repeated attempts to persuade him couldn't change his decision. With 23 people remaining, since it was an odd number, a drawing was used to select one person to receive a bye and advance directly. Without a doubt, Klee's luck double took effect again, sending the little girl directly into the bye slot, advancing her to the official tournament without any effort. Uruka, standing nearby, didn't know what to say. He couldn't see the little girl's terrifying luck value at school, but now it was being demonstrated to the fullest. Shikaku stood beside him with his arms crossed. With one glance, he saw Uruka's expression of shock and speechlessness, and he patted his shoulder with a smile. Clay is indeed a very lucky child. When I took her to a promotion at the barbecue restaurant before, she won a free meal on her first draw. Uruka nodded numbly. He also wanted to say that Clay never hurts herself when she's fish blasting, although that wasn't exactly something worth bragging about. During their conversation, the list for the first match appeared: Uchiha Sasuke vs. Yoroi Ikato. The others went to the platforms on the left and right sides to rest. The three little ones of Team 9 gathered around Shikaku. Teacher. We all passed the second round. The three little ones reported all at once, each smiling very happily. Shikaku exhaled softly and patted each of their shoulders. Well done. Although luck played a big part, he had to admit that the three little ones getting this far was already a pleasant surprise. Clay giggled. Thinking that her two teammates still had to participate in the preliminaries, she pulled them aside and whispered to them. Shikaku saw the cute little round balls the girl was handing out through the gap and fell into silence. Theoretically, according to the rules, these things without chakra were considered a type of ninja tool and weren't a violation, but thinking of the terrifying power contained within one little ball, Shikaku shuddered and silently mourned for the two boys' opponents. He still didn't know how such a cute little girl like Clay could have such terrifying things like bombs in her little head. It seemed every time she brought out a new little ball, it gave his heart a shock. When Shikaku's vision caught a glimpse of those familiar white balls with cute little ears, he got PTSD and quickly looked away, pretending he hadn't seen anything. Clay was still whispering. This is Jumpy Dumpty Type 3. The explosion range is, the time until explosion after being thrown is, using a substitution jutsu at, place will allow you to just barely escape the range. The two little ones nodded as they learned, unaware that they were quietly developing along some uncontrollable path. Fujiwara Tomo could not only remember everything but also ask questions to clarify and ensure the data was more accurate, but Kawakami-I's brain was slower. He couldn't even keep track on his fingers and could only desperately try to memorize the key points Clay mentioned with a bitter face. They were well aware that in front of the ninjas present, they were ordinary with almost no advantage. So they needed to find another way. Klee's Jumpy Dumpty was an excellent tool. Ninjas from other villages didn't know the power of these little balls, and ninjas within the village didn't know Clay had already developed many models like I, 2, 3, IV, V, and so on. Information asymmetry was an advantage that could potentially lead to a one-hit victory. Tomo knew this very well. Oh, Clay pulled out two little balls slightly different from the previous ones. These two are ones Clay just made. I haven't tested their power yet, so you too, She tried to find words to express her meaning. Tomo quickly understood. Don't use them unless it's absolutely necessary. Clay nodded hurriedly. Tomo and Kawakami I put away all the little balls and said they remembered. The matches on the field proceeded quickly, and soon it was the turn of one of the two boys. Next match, Fujiwara Tomo vs Sumu Kenmi. Tomo stood on the stage nervously. He knew this was his first match since the Chunin exams began, and even his first formal battle since Shikaku's test. His mind was very agile, so he clearly knew his advantage didn't lie in actual combat. Moreover, the lack of experience made him inevitably nervous. Standing opposite him was a ninja wearing round-framed glasses with a long cloth covering his face. He looked experienced in combat. Tomo pressed down on his trembling hand and waited for the referee to speak. Gecko Hayate raised his hand after confirming both were ready. Start. At first, Tomo didn't use the Jumpy Dumpty Clay gave him, but instead tried to throw shuriken and kunai to distract the opponent. However, the ninja in front of him was like Clay. His limbs could strangely stretch and contract at will, easily dodging all attacks. A hint of disdain appeared in his small eyes behind the glasses. Tomo pursed his lips, clearly realizing his horizons were still too narrow. He knew almost nothing about ninjas with special ninjutsu, body structures, or bloodline limits. Suddenly, the ninja in front of him disappeared. Almost simultaneously, a strong sense of crisis rose in his heart. His eyes widened, and his hands moved so fast they left afterimages, allowing him to use a substitution jutsu just a split second before the attack from behind landed. Seeing the attack miss, Sumu Kenmi slowly stood up straight, his expression cold and contemptuous. Is this the strength of a true ninja? Tomo barely managed to steady himself, his heart sinking. Soon, he made a decision and stopped holding back. Taking a step forward, he threw a string of cute little balls out as if they were free. Sumu Kenmi narrowed his eyes. He had already seen that this boy didn't have much strength and wanted to end the match quickly, but, what was this now? He looked at the balls that could be considered cute in confusion. Was this some new ninja tool? But there were no chakra fluctuations. But then he saw Fujiwara Tomo suddenly stop and turn to run. His alertness spiked, but it was too late. Since he was below the stage, he didn't know that the moment the string of little balls appeared, the Konoha ninjas on the stage all turned their gazes toward the harmless-looking little girl with the small backpack. Everything happened in an instant. The balls spun around, the red four-leaf clovers spinning on top were vivid and bright. The next second, boom! A huge sound echoed through the space. Dust and smoke billowed, and bricks were sent flying, only to be blocked by several jonin on the stage. Kurenai Yuhi cast a shocked look at Shikaku, your student. Shikaku nodded, holding his forehead. He had already guessed the result, but he still couldn't help but be shocked by the power of Klee's bombs. The dust cleared, and the result was presented before them, with no suspense. Tomo leaned against the wall, panting in a disheveled state. To avoid the opponent noticing anything was wrong, he had slightly disregarded Klee's warning and thrown the bombs from a relatively close distance. He didn't expect that even such a small deviation in distance would cause him to be blown away by the explosion's aftershock. As for his opponent, it was even more gruesome. Extensive burns had already left him unconscious in a corner. Gecko Hayate walked forward hesitantly, glancing at the large crater on the ground with lingering fear, and announced the match result: Fujiwara Tomo, winner. Soon, medical ninjas arrived with a stretcher and carried away the unconscious Sumu Kenmi. Standing at the high point, the Sandaime quietly gave a signal to a ninja who had appeared behind him at some point. The ninja bowed his head and vanished. The Jonin leader from the hidden sound village nearby slowly narrowed his narrow eyes revealing a snake-like eeriness. So you've noticed after all. Teacher. All the undercurrents occurred silently, and the ripples soon vanished. Although the venue was damaged, the matches had to continue. The next match was Akamichi Choji vs. Kawakami I. Looking at the devastation of the venue, Choji stood on the stage with trepidation. Then, seeing his opponent tossing a very familiar-looking little ball in his hand, his pupils dilated in shock. I forfeit. Without even a half-second of hesitation, Choji raised his hand. If he used the multi-size jutsu, wouldn't he just become a giant target for the bombs? He wasn't going to do something so thankless. Because of Tomo's intimidation earlier, Kawakami I advanced painlessly. Regarding Choji's forfeiture, Asuma Sarutobi sighed heavily, though he didn't blame him for it. Asuma was also shocked by the power of Klee's Jumpy Dumpty. Worried that his student might be hurt, he looked at the little fat boy with his head hanging low and simply patted his shoulder. It's okay, Choji. Just work harder next time. Beside him, Shikamaru rubbed his chin, silently staring at the terrifying crater in the solid floor, and gave a quiet shiver. He truly admired his past self, who had reached out and pulled her back when he saw Clay blasting fish in the stream. Because it had exploded in the water, and due to elemental counters, he hadn't clearly realized the terrifying power those cute Jumpy Dumpties, large or small, could produce. He had only been worried the little girl would hurt herself. As for now, he was starting to feel a bit sorry for his ignorant self back then, and also. Shikamaru glanced at Clay, who was leaning over the railing with her head hanging low. The little girl was staring intently at the crater with a pouting mouth, seemingly feeling a bit of guilt for having caused trouble. The culprit didn't even know the bombs she made were that scary, she only knew she had caused trouble and was going to be scolded again. Shikamaru's lip twitched, and then he looked up at the third Hokage, who stood with his hands behind his back. The old man's eyes were hidden in the shadow of his Hokage hat's brim, making his expression unreadable. He felt his temples throbbing, as if he could already see countless future possibilities that would make him sigh. How troublesome. Sigh, Shikamaru let out a breath and pushed his thoughts aside, because it was his turn for the next match. Despite the minor disturbance, Shikamaru still secured victory in his match quite easily. The following matches proceeded quickly. Naruto's dogged persistence when defeating Inuzuka Kiba made everyone look at him in a new light. Although Hinata was no match for Neji, she held on until the very last moment, finally collapsing while trembling in pain. Neji was about to offer some cold sarcasm, but as soon as he looked up and saw Clay clinging to the railing in a bad mood, the sharp words twisted around in his mouth and bounced back into his stomach. He couldn't set a bad example for a child. In fact, from the moment he realized this, he had even held back during the match and hadn't struck too hard. He took a deep breath, gave Hinata a cold sidelong glance, and then vanished back to the spectator stand without looking back. The medical ninjas came again, and the medical ninjas left again. Naruto watched from afar as Hinata was carried away, feeling inexplicably angry, but Neji hadn't done anything excessive, he had merely slightly prolonged a one-sided match. He didn't know why he had such strange thoughts, but he secretly resolved that if he met Neji in the main tournament, he had to defeat him. Next was Kankuro against Dosu. Using his puppet to catch his opponent by surprise, he successfully advanced. Then it was Gaara against Rock Lee. The momentum created by Gaara's sand was in no way inferior to the explosion of a Jumpy Dumpty. Sand burial. The red-haired youth's expression was distorted as the sand, which remained golden despite being stained with the blood of countless people, rushed toward Rock Lee carrying a terrifying killing intent. Oh no. The referee wanted to intervene, but it was already too late. A speck of bright red traced a parabola through the air and landed lightly in the pile of sand. This was Klee's newly developed Type 6 Jumpy Dumpty, filled with several times more runes than the previous model. Clay hadn't even tested its power yet, and in her haste, she hadn't noticed she had grabbed this specific one before throwing it out. Boom! A sound wave 10 times more massive than the previous explosion erupted with a roar. Even though the venue was built with exceptionally sturdy materials, it couldn't withstand the power of this explosion. Cracks spread across the walls like a spider web, and then they could no longer contain the aftershock, suddenly bursting open. Several Jonin scrambled to protect their students. Fortunately, they weren't at the center of the explosion, so they had a few moments to react. On the high platform, the third Hokage even cast aside his robes and rushed down to save people. Not only were the future pillars of Konoha here, but also many genin and jonin from other hidden villages. It would be a disaster if anything happened to them. Rock Lee, who was not at the center of the explosion, was even shielded by clay with a fire element shield. He merely flew out in an arc, but Gaara, who was very close to the center. As the mushroom cloud gradually dissipated, everyone looked quite disheveled. Amidst the dust and smoke, a massive sand shell slowly revealed itself, but the hitherto invincible sand shield had a huge hole in it, and blood slowly dripped from the boy's forehead like a trickle. Clay realized she had caused a major disaster. Although she was very close to the explosion point, the little girl was completely unharmed. She only apologized hurriedly. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Clay didn't know this Jumpy Dumpty was so powerful. The boy inside the sand shell slowly raised his head, staring dazedly as a thick red began to cover his vision. Blood, it's blood. He murmured softly, I'm injured, you made me bleed. A terrifying killing intent suddenly rose in his emerald eyes. His own team's Jonin leader's shouts seemed distant at this moment as he slowly raised his hands to form a seal, his eyelids drooping bit by bit. Gaara, wait, Gaara, Baki realized something was terribly wrong. He shouted to stop him, but it was already in vain. Baki cursed bitterly. It was too early to act, and the fourth Kazekage wasn't here. He caught the third Hokage's gaze out of the corner of his eye and could only grit his teeth, turning his sight toward the hidden Sound Village's Jonin leader. Hey, move the plan forward. What plan? The crowd, still in a state of disarray, hadn't recovered yet when they heard those words, and they all froze in place. The corner of that hidden Sound Jonin's mouth slowly curled up to his ears. You really did have ill intentions. The Sandaime, now in his combat gear, glanced at Baki before glaring intently at the snake-like ninja from the hidden Sound Village, slowly spitting out his name, Orochimaru. And, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the sand crawling up the corners of Gaara's eyes, Sunagaku's Jinchuriki. Almost instantly, several well-trained Jonin reacted, pointing their focus toward the ninjas from Sunagaku and the hidden Sound. Battle was imminent. What's going on? Kawakami looked left and right, his expression blank. Ji reacted quickly. Experiencing this for the first time, his voice trembled. It's Sunagaku and the hidden Sound. They're attacking Konoha. Shikamaru gritted his teeth. While the Sandaime was still contending with Orochimaru, Might Guy and Nara Shikaku attacked Baki and his group simultaneously. Kakashi and Kurenai Yuhi, who had disappeared and reappeared at some unknown time, rushed toward Gaara, who was slowly undergoing tailed beast transformation within the sea of sand. How did that troublesome possibility appear so quickly? Ah! He turned to see his classmates still in a daze and shouted at the top of his lungs, hey, don't just stand there. Whatever they're trying to do, stop them. Clay looked at everything happening before her almost blankly. A light screen appeared before her at some point, and in the main quest that had jumped from 4 to 1, several blurred words slowly became clear. Main Quest 1. Stop the Konoha Crush Plan. Still at a loss, Clay didn't notice that the button, whose purpose she previously hadn't known, had already lit up. She simply waved away the light screen and stared intently at the chaotic scene. She stood to one side, helpless, worried that her bombs might hurt her own people. Even though Kakashi and Kurenai Yuhi were very fast, they still couldn't prevent Gaara's tailed beast transformation. The giant monster burst through the tower, which was already precarious due to the Jumpy Dumpties, and landed in the center of the Forest of Death, nearly blotting out the sky. Its coin-shaped eyes were filled with manic joy. This great me is finally out. What is this? Kawakami backed away in fear. This was the first time he had seen a creature of this level, massive, terrifying, and seemingly invincible. At this moment, Clay suddenly remembered Kurama's warning. Looking at the non-fluffy giant monster before her, she finally understood why. The little girl clenched her fists, her gaze moving repeatedly across the messy battlefield. She saw that all attacks were in vain, Yet the teachers still stood firmly between the tailed beast and their students, having sustained various degrees of injury from repeated attacks. She saw the third Hokage, his back aged but straight. Hiruzen Sarutobi's expression was grave. He wanted to step forward to seal the Ikibi, but Orochimaru blocked him with a smile and clapped his hands, causing two coffins to appear before him with a thud. Orochimaru glanced at the chaotic scene with a hint of regret. What a pity, the plan was moved forward far too much. He whispered softly, his voice so low it was almost inaudible. This was originally what I prepared for you, teacher, your own grand finale. The coffin lid slowly fell, revealing two figures inside who had once intimidated an entire century. The entire area fell silent, staring in horror at the two former Hokage, who had been dead for years but whose stories were still passed down through the ages. The first Hokage and the second Hokage. Senju Hashirama and Senju Tobirama. Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Orochimaru. You are desecrating the dead. Orochimaru gave a sinister smile. How could that be? I'm simply reuniting teacher and students. This is. Tobirama opened his eyes, and before he could grasp the situation, he was controlled into attacking Hiruzen Sarutobi. Hashirama was no exception, though his eyes wandered restlessly, and the massive Ikibi was the first thing he noticed. Oh. Is this, the Ikibi? Tobirama had already begun asking the Sandaime about the situation. Hey, monkey, what's going on? Hiruzen Sarutobi's hands flew as he formed seals, erecting layers of barriers to block the powerful water dragon bullet. He defended against attacks from all directions while quickly explaining the current situation to the two Hokage. On the other side, Clay observed for a long time and finally noticed that there were no allies behind the Ikibi, so she dashed over. Shikamaru didn't stop her, only whispering a caution, be careful. At this moment, all worries had to be suppressed. They were Konoha ninjas. When the village suffered such a crisis, no one could remain a bystander. Clay quietly crept behind the Ikibi. She was so small that even wearing such brightly colored clothes, she was like a tiny ant to the tailed beast. But the little ant pulled out a pile of Jumpy Dumpties. Big monster, Clay muttered, throwing the little round balls as if they cost nothing. You're bullying everyone, Clay hates you. Boom boom boom, a series of earth-shattering explosions rang out, with flames splashing and dust billowing. The Sandaime's side also noticed the massive commotion. Hashirama immediately spotted the little girl wearing a Konoha forehead protector and raised an eyebrow in surprise. Wow, the younger generation is truly formidable. What a cute little girl. He muttered to himself, finding Clay particularly pleasing to the eye. Meanwhile, before Shukaku could react, half of its body was blown away, and its coin-shaped eyes suddenly constricted. Sand reformed into its body once more as it shrieked. Ow, ow, ow. That hurt like hell. This great me is angry. It whipped its head around, its fiery eyes filled with killing intent. The slight hint of strange goodwill it had felt upon seeing the little girl vanished completely. This great me is going to kill you. Sand swept toward her. Clay turned to run, but she couldn't outrun the faster quicksand. The little girl dove to the side, dodging one attack, though she was still scratched by the sharp sand. Fortunately, at Shikaku's reminder, Might Guy rushed toward the little girl immediately. He reached Clay's side just in time, scooped her up, and ran. So amazing. Kawakami I gripped a kunai, having seen this scene from afar as shame welled up in his heart. Clay was so small, yet she was braver than he was. He punched his leg hard, the kunai grazing it and leaving a bloody mark. Stop shaking. Our attacks are too light for a tailed beast. Shikaku frowned, his gaze scanning rapidly until it suddenly locked onto a spot. The Jinchuriki. Wake him up. Now, everyone had a target to attack, but under Shukaku's angry yet focused interference, it was still too difficult. Shukaku glared at the group who kept tickling it, occasionally tickling hard enough to cause pain. It roared and suddenly opened its mouth. Terrifying power condensed in its mouth. A tailed beast ball. Hiruzen Sarutobi saw it and felt his eyes nearly split. He wanted to help, but he couldn't move an inch. Are there not even any ninjas to stop a tailed beast? Hashirama asked. After all, in his eyes, tailed beasts were as easy to bully as toys. Before Hiruzen Sarutobi could reply, Orochimaru sneered first, the current Konoha. He didn't continue, his snake-like pupils full of mockery. A gap between generations, fragile and weak. Like a stuck windmill with rusted blades, stagnant. So he had brought a gust of wind. Either the windmill would be blown down, rotten wood that cannot be carved, or it would rise with the wind, proving it was still grand and powerful. Now, the situation was clear, the building was about to collapse. Orochimaru disappointedly raised his hand and formed seals. Hashirama uncontrollably clapped his hands. Would release. Nativity of a world of trees. Trees grew wildly out of control, rushing toward the group of ninjas who were forming seals in an attempt to stop Shukaku. The group's rhythm was instantly disrupted, and they had to first deal with the frantically growing roots and vines. Clay was well protected, but she stared blankly as that destructive power aimed at her, her friends, and her teachers. She instinctively threw her last jumpy out, Clay. Clay won't let you hurt everyone. However, Shukaku, already knowing the power of these little round balls, cautiously used sand to wrap around them and fling them away. Clay stood there in a daze. Behind her, I had already grabbed her, crying hysterically, I don't want to die, wah. Destruction was about to descend. It seemed she couldn't stop anything. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.